In a world where magic exists, kingdoms, kings, and queens, night has fallen. Bright stars were strewn throughout the sky, and a large moon illuminated the earth. A little girl with pink hair lay peacefully in her crib, coughing occasionally. She brought her fingers closer to her mouth to warm them with her breath, because they were completely red from the cold. The girl noticed that the luxurious bedroom with a large bed, on which she had been trying to sleep all this time, became very cold, and thought that at this rate she might even die. The heroine wondered what kind of room she was in, and why it was so cold in it, and did not even notice the clot of darkness appearing nearby. Suddenly, Anissa heard someone's voice calling out to her, which is why she had to get out of bed and rub her eyes, because it was her friend who had appeared. In front of her, she saw a handsome 8-year-old boy, Dietrich Lagrange, whom she called her brother. He asked the girl if she was awake. The baby replied that she had not slept at all, and Dietrich asked why. During this, a certain dark entity approached the girl. Anissa, who was stroked on the head by a black something, said that she did not sleep just like that, surprised that her brother was already controlling the shadow as if with his own hands. The heroine asked the shadow to take his hand away from her, thinking that she knew that even if you are the strongest villain, being next to someone will change. The reality in which this little girl lives is the world of a short story she read in a past life called The War of the Roses of Those Men. The boy in front of her is the only heir of his family who got rid of other candidates for power and has the right to take the place of the Duke. And also, before becoming a hero, he was sealed by the main character, Herman Euclid. This little boy is the villain in the novel. He, still with his cold gaze, asked his sister if they were coming again. Anissa asked who he meant, thinking about how sorry she was that her brother was sealed away, but she felt that he was holding up well. Pretending to be pure innocence, the heroine thinks how beautiful her friend will be when he grows up. Without waiting for an answer from his sister, Dietrich asked her not to take his question into her head. Instead, he asked if her abilities had begun to manifest. She modestly replied that no, although in fact she was Anissa Lagrange, and this young man was brother and sister, born from the same mother, although the latter was not born with the ability to control shadows like her brother. The little girl reached out to Dietrich with her hand and began to plaintively ask him for forgiveness, because in fact she was not his sister. The main character was born into a clan that was not on the best terms with the Lagrange family, the Euclid family. Therefore, the person who will seal Dietrich is Herman Euclid, and she, the younger sister of the main character. The girl thinks that Herman also does not know about her, but she's the only one who was not born with the power of the sun in her family, which is under the protection of the sun. Anissa's mother, when she saw her newborn daughter, called the people who said that this was her child a lie, because it could not be so. When even her own mother abandoned her, she was kidnapped by the Lagrange clan, but the Euclid family, for whom the girl was a thorn in their side, did not look for her. That's how the baby became the youngest daughter in the Lagrange family, and while she is away from this terrible house, the only one she can trust is Dietrich. Here she is despised, so she tightens her grip on the only toy that is her consolation, although she is glad that she was born an aristocrat. The girl understands that the Lagranges are not going to spend money on her because she does not have any abilities, so she can only get along with Dietrich. Meanwhile, the boy threw some strange object on his sister's bed and told her to take it, and when asked what it was, he answered that it was a rattle. She immediately said that she didn't need it, offended that her brother still saw her as a child playing with rattles. But as soon as she took her friend's gift in her hand to say that she was old enough to play with it, suddenly a sharp blade like a sword appeared from the rattle, which greatly puzzled the little girl. While she was shocked that the knife was disguised as a toy, he calmly said that it goes into this mode when shaken. The Lord of Shadows recommends that the little sister simply shake the toy, if, like that time, a shadow sneaks in and someone tries to kill her. The girl asked again in bewilderment, and he menacingly repeated that in case of danger, she should simply shake the rattle in front of the offender's throat. Anissa fell into a stupor, because in her brother's eyes, she looks like a child who is capable of cutting another person's throat. The main character threw the gift away and firmly said that she could not accept it, and the boy calmly asked why. She repeated that she couldn't, and Dietrich again intimidatingly asked why. The girl was surprised that her brother was only 8, but he looked so scary. In the end, the little girl lost her nerve and shouted that she couldn't do this because she was still a child. She began to cry because her brother could suggest to her, who doesn't even know how to write, to kill someone. In her mind, she calls him a crazy psycho, Anissa burst into tears because she thought that being born the youngest daughter in a family of dukes, above whom only the emperor, a sweet life awaited her. But no, the protagonist remembers that in a past life she was an outcast in her own family. She was treated as a disgrace to the family because she was not as talented as her brother or sister. She thought that being reincarnated as the duke's daughter would be better than her previous life. But suddenly, she realized that she had become Anissa from the world of the novel she had read. An ordinary girl turned into a 1-year-old child with red hair and pink eyes. Even though things turned out that way for her, she believes that her parents from her past life at least raised her properly. Lying in a small crib, the girl sighed, thinking about the place she had been reborn into. And the man standing next to her began to wonder what was wrong with the child. Servant Lancel, who heard the baby's heavy sigh, has no idea what's wrong with her, and, grimacing with a dissatisfied face, calls himself terribly unlucky. He asked why he had to look after the troubled princess, but the girl who understood him knew that he was doing this because he was new. Firmly grasping the crib, the man irritably asked a certain Madame Camilla why she died giving birth to such mediocrity. Lancel is terribly annoyed by the fact that if the mother of this child had remained alive, he would have avoided the miserable burden of changing children's diapers. The servant continued to loudly complain out loud that Madame Camilla gave birth to this terrible child and died, and Anissa's ears seemed to be withering from his screams. The woman Lancel served was one of the wives of the Grand Duke of Lagrange. Camilla was also the mother of the main villain who opposed Hermann Euclid in the novella The War of the Roses of Those Men. The book said that she died giving birth to the protagonist, but in fact the girl is not her daughter. In the past, when she was living a carefree life, Camille held the newborn protagonist high and asked if she was the same child of Euclid. She was indeed the daughter of Euclid, the enemy of the House of Lagrange. But at that moment, the heroine was so fascinated by the beauty of the heroine that she could not think about anything. Camille showed up after the birth and whisked Anissa away. Then she was captured by the enemy knights, who intended to take the lives of everyone. One of the warriors, looking at the pregnant Mrs. Lagrange, asked what to do with the child, to which the other said that no one should ever find out about him. The funniest thing in the heroine's opinion is that they didn't even try to save her, their heir, but ordered everyone to be killed, which scared her very much. However, the truth was that the Knights of Euclid were pursuing them with one goal, to take her life. They dealt with the pregnant Camilla without hesitation. Seeing a newborn child with pink hair and eyes next to the murdered Duchess, the warrior without hesitation pointed his sword at him. The last thing Anissa saw was a sharp sword blade. She doesn't remember what happened to her next, but she survived and was accepted by the Lagranges as Camille's daughter. Now, when the servant is tormenting her, pulling her hands, she thinks that this is better than dying. But life in the new family was not much different from the previous one. The little girl began to cry because the man was mocking her, calling her an ugly child. It hurts her when her hand is grabbed like that. The child was so frightened by the man's behavior that he burst into tears, and he irritably asked the girl why she was crying so much. Lancel angrily shouted to the newborn that he was the only one who needed to cry here. The subordinate shouted to the little girl that it would be better for her to die, but she suddenly noticed an aura of black hatred appearing on his chest, but with a blue center. The man burst into tears, sadly discussing why everything happened this way and his mistress died. The protagonist noticed that a blue aura of sadness appeared around him, which means that he loved Camilla. It turns out that the main character does not have the abilities of the Euclid sun, but she does have the ability of energy. She understands the aura of people and is able to foresee the future. Suddenly, the servant stopped crying, wiped the tears from his face, and headed towards the exit of the room, which put the main character into a stupor. The girl began to be mischievous, screaming and twitching, because that servant left without even remembering that she needed to be fed. But then Anissa stopped crying and thought that Lancel really didn't want her to survive, and all because of the Grand Duke Derek Lagrange. She believes that Dietrich is much better than him. There are more than 20 children registered in her Lagrange foster family, and sometimes some are left unattended. 2 boys were approaching the child's room, whose adoptive father, Derek, is an idiot who does not care about them, but only about those who are suitable as heirs. The father gives the children unusual psychological and mental tests, because everyone needs outstanding skills. That's why Anissa is in some danger. Her danger, for example, lies in 2 boys who looked into her through the open door and began to examine her. The little girl's eyes widened in shock when she heard from one of the boys who came that they just needed to deal with her. The taller boy told his friend to do everything quickly while no one was there, and he, smiling eerily, agreed. The girl began to be even more afraid when she saw these guys have a yellow aura, which means that they are amused by this, but it turns out that they are completely out of their minds. The baby is becoming more and more uneasy because she knows that eliminating competitors is one of the many tests in the Lagrange family, and being a weak and defenseless child in such a place is the most dangerous. The heroine burst into tears, mentally begging the boys not to do anything bad to her. She can't believe that she can't do anything but cry. Immediately after this, the crybaby noticed that the young men began to look at her with disgust, which is why she thought that her provocation had worked and they would leave her. Suddenly, something happened that made the child quiet. A stern, boyish voice was heard asking the guys what they were doing here. One of the hooligans asked Dietrich not to disturb them, and Anissa realized that they did not stop because they were touched by her sweet and desperate sob. But the Lord of Shadows who suddenly appeared did not fulfill the boys' request, but again, with frightening calm, asked what they were doing here. The boys again asked him not to interfere in their affairs, and Anissa realized that the same Dietrich had appeared, who in the future would become the strongest villain. She continued to make the plaintive sounds that babies usually make when they cry, but in reality, she really wanted to see Dietrich's face. The girl is very angry that because of her damn body she cannot get up because her head is too heavy. Meanwhile, the hooligans began to tremble because the young magician angrily told them that he was asking them about something else. The next moment, the little girl sighed in surprise because she saw an impressive picture above her. Using his magic, the boy lifted the bullies up, which is why they began to beg him to stop. And the heroine realized that this young man was incredibly strong. As the Shadow Lord walked closer to his little foster sister and looked at her, she was amazed at how handsome her savior was. She couldn't even take her eyes off him, thinking that, as expected, the greatest villain's face was simply beaming with its magnificence. One of the robbers shouted to Dietrich a well-known fact. All newborns become victims of heirs, so they do not need to be punished. He made a sly movement with his fingers, feigning surprise that he was here, and this impudent man still dared to justify himself to him. As soon as the boy clenched his fist with his hand, his shadow force squeezed the two scoundrels very tightly in its arms. One of them admitted his mistake and says that he knew that the little girl was his sister. Hearing that one of the boys called the main character his sister, Dietrich weakened his hand and waved it to weaken his strength. By the will of the talented magician, the hooligans fell to the floor, and the magician himself asked if they thought that he stopped them only because that girl was his sister. He called the statement of his brother Galen stupid, but he annoyedly asked why he was doing this. About to use his shadow magic again, Dietrich says that he did so only because in this game there is a special condition. To protect. Frightening clumps of shadows appeared around the two boys, which made them say that they were very sorry, and they did not know that he was protecting her. The shadow ruler ordered the boys to leave the room if they understood correctly. Galen fearfully said that he understood everything perfectly, after which he rushed towards the exit, and his friend, not keeping up with him, asked him to wait. Anissa, who had been watching this performance all this time, thought in admiration about how a 6-year-old child could be so charismatic. The protagonist is once again convinced that this villain is the one with whom she must stay close in order to stay alive. In her mind, the girl enthusiastically decided that she was choosing him, and she needed him to be her protector until she ran away from here. But while she was thinking about her plans, Dietrich again clenched his fist in his hand, causing only a huge puddle of blood to remain from the two bullies, who did not even have time to escape from their brother. Anissa noticed that it became very dark, which made her think that her brother had gotten rid of these guys, although she thought that he would let them go. The heroine thought about how merciless he was, when suddenly the Lord of the Shadows directed his cold gaze at her, and she realized that he was coming towards her. The little girl strained her memory and remembered that in the original work it was Hermann who used his younger sister Anissa, and not Dietrich. With a sparkle in her eyes, the child realized that this evil man, whatever he was the only one she could trust. Baby decided to make Dietrich her protector so that she could survive, and he would only find out who she was when the war broke out. Then they will run away together. The main character began to make cute sounds, as if trying to pronounce some word. She wants her brother to see her charm, but he only coldly asked the newborn what he was trying to tell him. Anissa is upset that none of her tricks are working. The boy told his sister that she was noisy, and the heroine noticed that since he entered the room, his aura had not changed, but remained the same gray. The little girl wanted to touch her brother's hand, but as soon as she succeeded, he immediately withdrew his palm and asked her what she was doing. Still smiling, Anissa was surprised that he wouldn't let her hold his hand, but if it had been another child in her place, he would have burst into tears. But the girl decides that she will not behave like that, but rather will make her protector feel the magnificent effect of the touch. She nevertheless touched the young gentleman's palm, guided by the fact that the seller who barely touches the buyer's hand when preparing the bill receives more tips. Dietrich coldly and calmly asked what the girl was trying to tell him if all she could do was pronounce strange and incomprehensible sounds. The little girl continued to mumble, pointing her finger at the boy. She is trying to convey to him that she calls him her brother. The Lord of Shadows frowned, which surprised Anissa very much, and he was only 6 years old. She believes that at this rate, wrinkles will appear on his forehead. The boy wanted to say something, but then the doors of the room swung open, and the space began to be filled with someone's frightening aura. It turns out that a respectably dressed man with red hair burst into the room, from whom a lot of frightening atmosphere emanated. The little girl began to tremble, feeling fear and bloody energy, because she knows who it is. Derek Lagrange, who is the head of the house, appeared. He menacingly asks Dietrich what he is doing here, and he replied that he was simply fulfilling a condition. The main character remembered that such auras as cruelty, bloodthirstiness, anger, and jealousy merge into one lump of dirt, like that of this frightening gentleman. Derek asked his son what kind of baby was in the crib, which made Anissa very angry because this man was talking about her like a thing. Dietrich, without changing his face and remaining just as cold-blooded, replied that this was the daughter of Camille Lagrange. The protagonist thought that it seemed that she and her real mother had nothing in common. Suddenly, the owner of the house, raising an eyebrow in confusion, asked the heir who Camilla was. The little girl was greatly outraged by this, because it turns out that the Duke does not even know his own wife. Derek asked Dietrich if he meant the combat slave he bought at the slave market, and the child replied that he did. Then the man asked why he didn't see Camilla nearby, to which the boy replied that she died giving birth to a child. Suddenly, the head of the family pitifully declares that in this case, he has wasted the money with which he bought his wife. But then he remembered that his deceased wife had left him an heir, so he declared that he would regard this as payment for his spent funds. These words of the gentleman so stunned the protagonist that she called him in her mind a crazy person, because he says this in front of his son who lost his mother. The man, meanwhile, calmly says that the first Lagrange children always died, and people like Dietrich quickly became candidates for heirs. The owner of the clan advises the young man to die quickly and not to be a parasite if he is not going to show him his skills. He, without showing any emotion on his face, humbly said that he would keep this in mind. This made Anissa incredibly angry, but she couldn't do anything, so she simply told the man in her thoughts that he was talking complete nonsense. Mr. Derek began to leave, reminding his son to behave decently, and the girl, wanting to somehow take revenge on him, showed him an indecent gesture. While the girl was showing her middle finger to her father and wondering what was wrong with it, Dietrich looked at her in bewilderment and said that it looked like her arms were broken. Unexpectedly, the young magician decided to place his palm on his sister's forehead and read a special spell. After that, he says that he can't seem to detect any abilities in the child, and the little girl guessed that her brother is using search magic to check whether she has abilities or not. The heroine knows that her abilities are not so weak that they can be easily detected, but she was surprised that this guy has been using magic for 6 years. Then the Lord of Shadows tells the baby something that made her instantly become more serious. He assumes that she will soon die. But the girl, grabbing her protector's hand and smiling joyfully, thought that this would not happen because she would hide in his shadow and survive. Sometime later, when Dietrich left her room, Anissa reflected that if she decided to survive thanks to him, she would do everything to look good. But the girl is incredibly unhappy that he has never shown himself since the last time they met. Suddenly, she heard a voice approaching her door and immediately made a cute face because she thought it was her beloved brother coming to her. But the baby was upset when she saw a servant instead, who came to feed her. She greeted him, calling him her food delivery guy, but he, having heard that she mumbled something unintelligibly to him, quickly put a bottle in her mouth, complaining that she was too noisy. The baby got even angrier when it turned out that her milk formula was too cold, which means that Lancel did not warm her up or even froze her. The girl quickly realized that this was not surprising, because Lagrange is a cold northern land, and he is an idiot. However, She does not think that the servant did this on purpose. Meanwhile, the man is annoyed by how stubbornly the child drinks the formula. He tells her that life is cruel after all, and Anissa realizes that he did not warm her up on purpose. After feeding the baby, the servant lifted him up so that the food got into his stomach properly, and the heroine promised herself that she would fire him as soon as she gained power. But when she burped instead of vomiting, as she had once, she felt sorry for Lancel and decided in the future to give him 10 minutes after dismissal. Tiny smiled again and called her uncle the food delivery guy. But in her thoughts, she makes a promise to herself that one day he will regret bullying her. Suddenly, the servant took the child by the arms to lift her up, saying that she was probably bored lying on the bed all day. Putting her down on the floor, the man says that since he is very busy, he needs to leave, so he will leave her here. Before going, the subordinate asks the child not to create a mess and to play calmly. The main character sweetly waved goodbye to him, although she guessed that today was the very day when Lancel would leave her to play alone. Closely watching the doors, which are about to close, the little girl admits that he, although careless, took care of her. But her body is already ready for her to become a four-legged master who ran to the doors with all her might until they finally slammed shut. The girl's trick was to have time to put a toy between the doors so that they would not close and she could get out. The little naughty girl was very happy because everything worked out for her. Leaving the room into the corridor, Anissa decided that now she needed to find Dietrich, so she began to sniff to find his aura. But she suddenly stopped because she found herself feeling like a dog. All the same, the protagonist understands that if she follows the smell of his aura, she will come to where he has been locked since childhood, a garden of withered roses. Walking through a quiet flower garden, the little girl realizes that this frightening place is indeed suitable for a villain. Here, the detective found her defender, who was standing among the bushes with a shovel. She quickly crawled up to him and called out cheerfully. Suddenly, next to her brother, she saw another boy, whose entire body, except for his head, was buried in the ground. Anissa thought they were burying him alive. A buried young man named Ulrich screamed at Dietrich to let him out, but he coldly reminded him that he had broken the rules of the game. Amazed by what was happening, the girl began to tug at her brother's clothes and call for him to pay attention to her. When the boy finally asked what she wanted, she mumbled something unintelligibly, but in reality she asked what he was doing. He, lifting his sister in his arms, asked her again, because he did not understand anything, asking her to speak normally, like a person. Anissa decided to show him her sweet and beautiful smile, but in reality she is angry that Dietrich demands too much from her, although she cannot pronounce words properly yet. She made a cute face, again trying to call him brother, but it didn't work out very well. The Lord of Shadows did not react in any way to the child's pampering, but sighed heavily and continued to hold her in his arms. Here, the main character, with a sly frown, thought that since her protector was holding her in his arms, then she might have a chance for something. But then she is pulled out of her thoughts by Ulrich, buried in the ground, who irritably asked Dietrich what he was staring at. The little girl was slightly embarrassed, because she had already forgotten that there was another person here besides them. However, having taken a good look at the face of the buried man, she remembered from the novella that he was the right hand of Dietrich, who for some reason was sticking out in the ground. It was this guy who was the faithful assistant to the Lord of Shadows in the story The War of the Roses of Those Men. By order of his master, he cut the throat of his Lord Derek, and he did not refuse Dietrich, whom the main character of the novel, Hermann, later sealed. Ulrich is a loyal subject who left to save his friend. Anissa pointed her finger at the future knight because she was wondering why he was in the ground, but he annoyedly asked why she was pointing at him. Dietrich told his little sister that she spoke like a chicken, and she was happy because she thought that he was saying this because he thought she was cute. But then the boy asked her to get off him, and the girl was upset because all her efforts spent on appearing cute were in vain. The heir threw the baby to the ground, telling her to crawl to wherever she wanted. Suddenly he turned around and announced that he was leaving, but the baby began screaming after him, in her mind begging him to wait, and the buried Ulrich screamed to let him out of here. The buried man continued to call Dietrich, and the heroine rather crawled after him, motivated by the fact that she should get another chance. She tried her best to catch up with him, but he walked away so quickly that she couldn't keep up with him, and because of this, she began to worry that she would lose him. Anissa understood that if she lost him now, she did not know when she would be able to meet him again. Suddenly, she felt that she had stepped on something with her hand. Raising her palm, the girl saw that a piece of glass had pierced her skin, which she had accidentally run into while crawling. The pain brought tears to the baby's eyes, and Dietrich, who heard plaintive sounds from behind, stopped. The unfortunate woman could not restrain herself and burst into tears, wondering in her mind how much she was in pain. The boy turned around and looked at her, and the protagonist was already offended at him for not coming, even if his sister was injured. The little one noticed that a red aura appeared around her brother and thought that he was angry because she was crying, although she herself believed that it was natural. Then she decided to shut up and not make any sounds, because he was annoyed by her crying, and if she cried again, they would kill her. But he, as always, with unfailing calm, asked his sister why she suddenly fell silent. When Dietrich reached out to her with the words that if she would die anyway, then it would be better to do it as soon as possible, the heroine was already preparing for the worst. The girl had already closed her eyes, because she realized that she had angered her brother and that her death was approaching. But instead, the Lord of Shadows suddenly sat down next to the victim and examined her wounded hand, after which he carefully pulled out a glass shard from it. Then the boy gently wiped away the tears from Anissa's eyes with his finger. She thought that, surprisingly, he was gentle with her. Rubbing the child's eyes, Dietrich, without taking his cold gaze off his sister, said that he considered her a strange child. The girl thought that even though he says that she is strange, he himself is even stranger, because he buries people alive and much more. The young magician began to bandage the heroine's wound with a cloth that he found nearby, and Anissa thought that he did not look like someone who would become a villain in the future. When the wounded limb was already bandaged, the girl felt pain again, but realized that if she cried again in front of Dietrich, he might get angry again. She reached out to him and tried to call him brother, although she realized that in this state it would be difficult for her to return to her room. Suddenly the boy, without saying a word, takes his sister into his arms. She thinks that she wouldn't be surprised if he left her in this state. However, peering into the cool expression on her defender's face, she realized that he was softer than she had imagined. Dietrich walked towards the palace, and the heroine was surprised in her thoughts that this particular child would become a merciless and unshakable villain in the future. Already approaching the building that all children should call home, the protagonist thought that Mr. Lagrange was too harsh towards his children. Once in the palace, Anissa realized something else that she had not noticed for a long time. It was empty, as if no one had ever been here. The Lord of Shadows approached the door and opened it, and the little one suggested that their castle became like this after Camilla died. Dietrich entered the room, in which there was a maid going about her business. She calmly asked the gentleman what happened, but when the boy said that he had brought her a wounded child, the maid's face showed an emotion of contempt and disgust. The woman, who frankly didn't care about the health of someone else's child, asked what was wrong with this that really amazed the main character. She wonders why the servants hate them so much. The maid defiantly asked the guy what she should do about it, and Anissa thought that if Dietrich killed her, he would be excluded from the candidates for heir. Unexpectedly, the young master, gently placing his hand on his sister's back, politely asks the maid to heal her. But a subordinate, who thought that he had hit the girl, asked why he needed to attack the child and then ask him to be cured. While the little one was in shock about how the girl allowed herself to talk to the duke's son, the boy said that he did not harm his sister. When the young wizard said everything as it was, the maid grimaced because she felt disgusted that now the boy was supposedly also lying. Dietrich listens to the maid's words that he is the son of a slave. Everyone in the palace knows who he is, so he should not hide his true deceitful essence. The heroine's defender became even more angry when the servant asked why he was trying to hide his shame if he knew perfectly well what it was. The boy calmly says that the glass is stuck in Anissa's hand, and if the wound is not disinfected and lubricated with ointment, it may rot. But the maid, chuckling, asked whether it mattered whether the wound would rot or not, if this girl would die anyway sooner or later. The little one started crying because he wanted to live, and the subordinate added that there was no money in the Dahlia Palace to buy medicine for them, and she didn't have any either. The main character noticed that a red aura began to emanate from her brother, thanks to which she realized that he was really furious. Dietrich, frowning, asked the girl if she thought that he did not know that she and Lancel were taking gold that should belong to the children. The girl, proudly walking past the young master, asked him not to accuse other people without any evidence, and added that, after all, he should hide his vulgar character. The maid wanted to leave, but the shadow magician did not allow her to close the doors behind her, thereby stopping her. He asks her to give him medicine, and he will cure the child himself. She fearfully said that she had already said that she did not have medicines or even money for them, and Anissa, watching them, noticed something strange. The girl realized that the maid was trying to escape as quickly as possible, closing the door with all her might. But Dietrich, who was holding her with his hand, did not allow her to do this. A certain plan appeared in the little girl's head, so she quickly ran to her brother and, tightly grabbing his leg with her hands, began to pull him back. Still, the door closed, and the young master still did not get what he wanted from the maid. In her thoughts, Anissa was glad that everything worked out for her. Dietrich, frowning menacingly, asked his sister why she stopped him, to which she thought that he would have been hurt if she had not pulled him away. Hearing only childish antics from the little girl in response, the boy asked her to forget about what he asked her, because she still didn't understand what he was talking about. The heroine continued to giggle sweetly, although she thought her brother was feeling lonely. She feels like she should just smile, so she does. But this did not cheer up her friend, but on the contrary, he told the girl that she looked like a fool. The protagonist began to cry out in displeasure, trying to convey that she was not a fool, but he only sighed heavily, as if the whole world was about to collapse. The defender, taking his little sister in his arms, left the room, asking her to behave decently. The little one looked at the boy, puzzled. Her mind wondered where they were going. After a while, Dietrich came into an empty room and put the child on the bed, after which he began to rummage through the nightstand that stood nearby. Anissa guessed that she was in his private room. The young gentleman took out a bottle of some kind of liquid, and the little girl was surprised at how dusty everything was, and his conditions were even worse than hers. Sitting down next to the baby with a bottle and a piece of cloth in his hands, the defender admitted that he had never treated anyone before. Going to bandage the unfortunate woman's wound, Dietrich asks her not to cry, even if it hurts, because he doesn't like it when people cry. In her mind, the heroine said that he was asking her the impossible, and she would not be to blame if she cried in pain again. But nevertheless, she tries to hold on. When the Lord of Shadows began to pour a special liquid onto the girl's wound, she immediately closed her eyes because she felt severe pain. She could not contain herself and burst into tears. Anissa thinks that although there were tears that couldn't be held back, she was afraid that Dietrich's aura would turn red. However, to her surprise, he simply looked at her silently with his jet-black eyes. At that moment, although the girl did not see the sad blue color in her brother's aura, for some reason she felt a slight melancholy on his face. The next day, the protagonist wakes up in her room to the beautiful chirping of birds outside the window. Examining her bandaged hand, she assumed that her defender had apparently already finished treatment. Baby thinks he is very diligent. The little girl thought that whatever that liquid was, she was no longer in as much pain as yesterday, however. Now she realized that the situation was worse than she thought. Dietrich is a candidate for heir, but his situation is no different from hers. He has no support in Uruk, so all the children despise him. Anissa doesn't think he receives financial support. Lancel and the maid's salary is definitely less than other palace servants, so they have no choice but to work and accumulate their discontent. Still, the little one believes that children should not be treated so meanly, because they are the future of the world. Then the butler Lancel enters the room, whom the little girl was very happy about, and called as usual, "Food delivery man." The man, noticing the child's bandaged hand, first asked what happened to her, but then said that everything was fine until she died. The little one was angry that this was all he could say about her wound. She wants him to take care of her, so she hinted to him to start feeding her soon, when suddenly a black aura began to emanate from the servant, and he himself wondered why he should even care whether this baby was hungry or not. The baby was very frightened by how Lancel's mood suddenly changed, and he began to scream hysterically that it was Anissa who killed Lady Camilla. The man began to mutter under his breath that if it had not been for the birth of this girl, his mistress would have been alive, and the heroine began to vigorously wave her arms. She does this so that the evil servant's aura becomes white, because, as she remembers, this is how Anissa cleansed people's auras in the original novel. Very quickly, Lancel's energy began to dissipate, and he started talking about how the newborn child was innocent, and the girl realized that she had succeeded. The man, as if nothing had happened, began to feed the girl, and the protagonist remembered that she had to clean him every time he came to her. She is again unhappy that he did not heat the milk. He began to talk about how he hoped that the situation in the palace would improve when Dietrich became a candidate for heir, but this did not happen. The subordinate suggested out loud that he needed to leave because his salary here was very small, but the heroine was happy in her mind and ardently supported his decision. But when the food delivery man said, "The young master hasn't been fed for a long time, but he thinks he's still alive," the little one almost choked with anger. The man lifted the child so that he could clear his throat and advised him to drink more slowly, but Anissa was shocked by what he just blurted out. Lancel muttered that he didn't think Janine cared about Dietrich, since there weren't even breadcrumbs in the kitchen, and it was strange that the boy was still alive. The baby began to scream indignantly because the butler seemed to think that only she needed to be fed, and the subordinate asked her ladyship to be quieter. The main character was shocked that it turned out that he was starving a 6-year-old child, and the degree of madness in this house is simply amazing. Suddenly, Lancel said that he was hungry, so he would leave the baby alone. And the girl was amazed that he was going to eat, knowing that the other child was not eating. The servant soon left the room, and Anissa, left to herself, is surprised at what a terrible house she has to live in. She realized that this upset her very much, and if the main character, Herman, had grown up in such a house, he would also have become a villain. Suddenly, the girl, taking her bottle of milk with her, decisively gets off the bed because she has decided something. Once on the floor, she, like a superhero, sets herself the goal that she will take care of Dietrich's food herself. Determined to win, the protagonist, putting her bottle in her pocket, began to crawl, thinking that she needed to feed her brother as soon as possible. But before that, she noticed a mirror on the table and wondered if she should look at herself, and if she tried hard, she might be able to reach it. While heading towards her goal, Anissa remembered that in the novel, it is said that she is beautiful, but Lancel calls her an ugly child every day, so she believes that she is not cute to Dietrich either. The child confidently reached for the mirror, because now her body can walk and stand a little. She only had a short distance to reach the desired thing with her hand. The girl manages to carry out her plan. She picked up the mirror with her fingers and dropped it on the floor, which made her a little scared. Finally, she brought it to her face to see herself in the reflection. The lady was very shocked by what she saw. To her surprise, the child she was reborn into was truly charming and sweet. The baby remembered the servant's words about how ugly she was. She answered in her mind that he himself was ugly, and he had problems with his eyes, since he did not see her beauty. Continuing to peer into the mirror, the girl remembered how a certain woman said that she was cursed. Anissa guessed it was because of her red eyes. In the north, where the heroine lives, there are many people with red eyes, but in the south, people consider red eyes to be a sign of a curse. Because of this feature, the inhabitants are expelled in the south, especially the Euclids, who have poor relations with the Lagranges. But the baby realized that it doesn't matter that her eyes are a cursed color, because she is very beautiful, cute, and petite. She then admitted that now Dietrich objectively looks more beautiful than her, but she is still cute. Suddenly, the cutie realized that she had forgotten about Dietrich. After sipping some formula from the bottle, because she still has a long way to go and needs to recharge, the traveler is ready to go again. Meanwhile, the young master spent time in the garden of withered roses, sitting and thinking about something near the fountain. Leaning on the fountain, his sister approaches him in small steps and happily greets him, trying to pronounce the word, brother. He didn't answer her, and the girl began to cough from how much dust had risen. This made the heroine very angry, because it turns out that there is no service at all in this palace. Dietrich silently took the baby in his arms and sat him on the edge of the fountain next to him. The boy asked his sister why she came here, to which she only made childish faces, but in fact Anissa thinks that he cares about her. The young master asked his sister what she was trying to tell him, to which she was happy, because it seemed that he remembered that she called him brother. The Lord of Shadows asked the girl in bewilderment why she was smiling so strangely, but she suddenly handed her defender a bottle of milk. The young magician asked what it was, and his sister simply answered, Mom, trying to convey with her thoughts that it was a baby bottle that she was giving him. Dietrich didn't want to take the gift, but she continued to insist, handing him the bottle, trying to pronounce different sounds. The boy asked to speak normally, but she, grabbing her friend by the sleeve, angrily thought that she also wanted to learn to speak. But so far she had not succeeded. Hinting to her brother to look at her carefully, Anissa showed by her example that she wanted him to take her bottle and drink milk. She again handed the young wizard her gift, hoping that this time he would accept her sincerity, but he only sighed heavily. The heir asked the girl if she wanted him to drink it, to which she said in her mind that this is exactly what he should do to please her. But then the young gentleman says something that immediately makes the little girl's smile disappear. He says that he doesn't want to drink her mixture. The heroine, who thought that he didn't want to drink because it didn't taste good, didn't think of backing down. She, leaning her elbow on her brother's shoulder, continued to offer him a drink, to which he shyly moved away. Anissa, bringing the pacifier to her brother's mouth, hinted for him to open his mouth, pretending that it was supposedly a plane that was flying towards him. But the Lord of Shadows, loudly repeating that he did not want to drink, threw away the bottle, leaving it rolling on the ground. The baby fell into shock, and Dietrich, getting up from his seat, this time in a calm voice told his sister that he had already said that he did not want to eat. The heroine silently began to climb down from the fountain, thinking that this stubborn child could at least pretend to drink her gift. She took her bottle back, angry that it had turned out this way, even though she had worked hard to get here. In fact, the girl began to cry because she felt very offended. The child can barely restrain his voice so as not to burst into tears all over the street. The unfortunate woman decides that she will not cry, and thinks that it was not enough to simply give the baby a bottle to Dietrich in order to make him like her. Meanwhile, the young master, after calling out to his sister several times, picked her up from the ground and asked if she was crying. He, having placed the baby on the fountain, wonders why she is crying and whether it is because he did not drink milk. She is angry that this is already obvious. It turns out that this is not why the girl is crying, although this also made her upset. She is sad because she suddenly felt unhappy. Suddenly, Dietrich, frowning, as if resigned to everything, took the bottle from his sister. Then he unscrewed the lid from the container and drank all the milk to the last drop. Giving the heroine back her drinking bowl, the Lord of Shadows asks if she is happy now, saying that he drank worse liquids than this. Anissa was so happy that her brother accepted her sincerity that she beamed with a smile, and now it seems that before that she was not sad at all. The main character, getting ready to pick up Dietrich again, wraps a bottle of milk in a cloth. It's been a month since she brought the formula to her brother, but then the girl calls him ill-mannered because she is the only one who visits him every day, and he himself never comes first. The nurse realizes that she has already seen Lancel's disgust many times when he came to feed her. He was annoyed that the baby managed to drink so much expensive milk. But the protagonist, meanwhile, decides to bring her friend some cookies, which her food delivery man left on the table. The girl deftly jumped up to get the box of sweets, but when the little girl wanted to reach it, she accidentally dropped it on the floor. Anissa quickly collected the remaining cookies in her pocket, convincing herself that only 3 seconds had passed since they fell, which means bacteria had not gotten on them. Shaking her palms from the sweet crumbs, she was determined to begin her long journey. The traveler walked out of her room into the corridor and got down on all fours. It is still difficult for her to move on 2 legs, so she will have to crawl. Suddenly, she heard approaching steps, and looking back saw a certain boy in front of her. This turned out to be the same gentleman whom the little girl first met when he was buried in the ground. He wonders if she is the same child. The baby did not answer anything, but only stared at the new man in bewilderment, wondering what Yurik was doing here, in the Dahlia Palace. The boy, picking up the little girl in his arms, says that he allegedly heard that she is Dietrich's real younger sister. The heroine began to twitch so that they would let her go quickly, but Yurik, noticing the baby's pockets full of cookies, asked where she was going with this luggage, because it was strange that she was walking here alone. Anissa noticed that the boy's aura had turned red, which made her realize that she had to be careful because he was not yet subservient to Dietrich. Looking at the blonde, she swallowed nervously, and although his aura is not completely red, she senses some hostility. Unexpectedly, Yurik, continuing to walk along the corridor with the child in his hands, told the girl that he would take her hostage and threaten his competitor. The little one thought it was a great pity, and it seems that he also doesn't know Dietrich well. She's sure his threats won't work if he uses her. The nurse suddenly decided that she would be even more comfortable if she went to her brother like this, so she relaxed in the boy's arms and allowed him to carry her. Yurik was very surprised by the child's behavior. He asked her if she was afraid of him. She smiled and hooted, because she is through the main villain of the future and other children who tried to kill her, so she is not afraid of him at all. A blush appeared on the young master's face. He embarrassedly called the heroine a strange child. He continued walking, and Anissa got mad at him for not telling her she was cute. Then the girl thought that now they were on the same side, and nothing would stop him from seeing her in a good light. The little girl decided to treat her new friend to cookies, but he was so surprised by this that he asked if she was giving him this sweetness. The blush on Yurik's cheeks intensified even more, and his aura turned a beautiful yellow color. He took the treat, shyly thanking the little one. The little lady, who noticed with what pleasure he took the first bites of sweetness, was surprised at how much he wanted what the servants were eating. But suddenly the blond man, freezing for a second, abruptly spat out everything he had managed to put in his mouth. The child was very surprised and frightened by this suddenness. Anissa began to make sounds of outrage, unhappy that he spat out her cookies that she had worked so hard to obtain. The young master, examining the treat, assumed that it was poisoned, and the little girl thought that he was so ungrateful that he dared to suspect anything. Yurik accused the little girl of slipping him the poisoned cookie because otherwise she would not have offered it to him. As proof, the boy cited the fact that she was the younger sister of his enemy, and the heroine, rummaging in her pocket, thought that he had once been deceived like that. To prove to the young man that sweets are without poison, the protagonist took out another cookie and boldly bit into it, causing him to be stunned. The heroine directed her determined gaze at her friend so that he finally understood that there was nothing in these cookies. But he began to persuade the baby to spit out the cookies as soon as possible, thinking that she would be poisoned. Anissa suggests that this guy doesn't fully trust people. Suddenly, the young master heard that the girl had swallowed the sweetness, after which he began to tell her that she should have spat it out, because these were the cookies that Dietrich ordered her to give to him so that he would die. She remembered that her brother had never given her such food, and Yurik unexpectedly suggested that his rival had planned such a turn of events. The next moment, something unimaginable happens. The boy turns the child upside down and forces him to spit out the poisoned food, but the tormentor suddenly freezes, because Dietrich himself appeared next to him, who, putting his hand on his shoulder, asked what he was doing. The main character was delighted to see her brother. The defender lowered her to the ground, after which she sighed with relief, because she thought that she would die like this. The Lord of Shadows repeated his question to the blonde, to which he excitedly said that his sister had swallowed poison. Dietrich, without taking his intimidating gaze off his competitor, asked him in a stern voice if he had fed her the poison. Eureka imagined this, and Anissa was surprised that a 6-year-old child could have such a pure, coal-black aura and cold, murderous determination. The young master asked the Shadow Lord not to look at him as if he were a coward like Brother Galen, and states that he does not prey on babies. The young magician called his opponent's words ridiculous, and saying that if this was so, he asked why he fed his sister poison. He began to make excuses, saying that he ordered the child to poison him, and the girl ate the cookies by accident. Anissa, feeling that the atmosphere is already starting to heat up, decides to quickly leave here. Dietrich states that losers are a class of their own, but tells the blonde that he seems to be no better than Brother Galen. He asked him again in rage. The young master admits with a smile that there is no point in poisoning him, because even if he allows him to become a candidate, he will still be expelled. Yurik's cheeks turned red like tomatoes from anger and shame. He calls Dietrich a fool, and he doesn't have to say whatever he wants. At this time, the main character, who is overtaken by the red aura of the blonde, which makes her unable to breathe, is in a hurry to quickly move away from the boys. But she froze when the young master, having analyzed everything that the Lord of Shadows told him, asked why she gave him the cookies then. The little girl had to stop and look at the two bullies in bewilderment. Yurik, as if not believing that this could actually happen, asked Anissa if she gave him the treat just like that. She was embarrassed and, like all babies, made an incomprehensible sound, which actually meant yes. Dietrich fell silent, and the blonde man, sitting down next to the baby, asked why she gave him the cookies, if, as it turned out, they were not poisoned. The little one didn't say a word, but she actually treated him because he was her brother's future subordinate, which is why she wanted to be friendly with him. She continued to be silent because she thought that Yurik would not understand her, even if she tried to say something, so they just stared at each other. The girl, carefully getting to her feet, smiled and hugged her new friend, thinking that it would be nice if he could also love her at least a little, because for her it is not at all difficult. The protagonist was suddenly puzzled by the fact that the boy suddenly froze. She noticed that his aura had turned almost green, although she doesn't know what it means. When Yurik's energy completely turned green, he grabbed Dietrich's sister by the hand and said that he was very sorry. She didn't understand and asked again, to which the young master repeated that he was apologizing to her because he didn't know that she gave him the cookies for nothing. When the blonde said these important words, the heroine finally understood what the green color of a person's aura means. Gratitude. Yurik, stroking the baby, once again asked her forgiveness for the fact that he misunderstood everything, but for her it was nothing, because she just treated him. The boy confidently assumed that she had no cookies left, because their palace was poor because miserable slaves lived here. This offended Anissa a little. He then apologized for spitting out her precious cookies due to the misunderstanding. She thought that his apology was truly sincere. The little one decided that she would forget the way he turned her upside down and shook her. She shook his hand and nodded, letting him know that she too had forgiven him. The girl wondered whether Urik's personality was like this from the beginning, because in the novel he was a minor character and did not appear often. Suddenly, she is picked up by her brother, who sternly asks his rival why he is in the so-called miserable Dahlia Palace. The magician's sister became wary because she heard the anger in his voice. Dietrich moved the little one, and finding herself on the floor again, she crawled further, suggesting that her brother was angry because of Urik's neglect of the palace. He, irritably stamping his foot, said that he had come to challenge him again in a game that he could not win last time. Anissa immediately guessed what kind of game it was that her new friend lost. She believes that the results were more than obvious. Meanwhile, Dietrich, smiling maliciously, asked his competitor if he wanted to be buried alive in the ground again. The blonde's face turned red as the Shadow Lord chuckled and said that he seemed to have rather specific preferences. Urik began to insist that he had not died and that this meant that it was a draw, and the heroine, peacefully watching what was happening, thought that this was what childish optimism looked like. He asks the young master to repeat their battle again, to which he coldly replied that unlike him, a weakling, he had already eliminated 2 candidates. The Lord of Shadows, deftly dodging his opponent's unexpected blow, calmly asked why he should waste his strength on him. The blonde ordered his opponent to shut up and would rather fight him if he had the courage. But before he could swing again, not only did he miss again, but he also didn't even notice how the young master tripped him up. The boy fell painfully to the floor, and Dietrich, calling him Euclid, asked not to disturb him. He was very angry that they called him that. He ordered his opponent not to talk nonsense and call him properly, Lagrange. But the young master indifferently declared that it did not matter to him whether he was Lagrange or Euclid as long as he did not touch him. Suddenly, the blonde man attacked his competitor with his fists and furiously told him not to look down on him. But before the attacker even had time to understand anything, in an instant, he found himself in the air due to the fact that the young master lifted him with his shadow power. The main character was very surprised when she saw her brother using his shadow ability. Soon the prankster found himself on the floor, in complete shock, but the huge hand of the shadow did not think of letting him go. Dietrich continued to taunt his competitor by using his magic to lift him upside down, much to Anissa's shock. The protagonist hurried to her brother, thinking that she was almost sure that in the novel the boys had a good relationship, but now for some reason they were fighting. Fearing that the two might kill each other, she began to tug at her protector's clothes and try to persuade him to stop. He indifferently asked what she wanted, and the girl continued to utter incomprehensible sounds, trying to convey to him that it would be problematic if he killed Urik, because it would be more difficult for them to get rid of Derek. After thinking a little, the Lord of Shadows released the unfortunate man, and he tiredly fell to the floor. The blonde clenched his teeth in anger, and Dietrich asked him if he knew that Derek Lagrange's mother was also a slave. Further, the young master sternly threatened his rival that if he showed up in this palace again and started talking nonsense, he would remove him from his path. The young wizard had already begun to leave, and Anissa, looking at Urik, thought that he looked like he was about to cry. But suddenly, she noticed that her defender was leaving as if nothing had happened. This made her slightly puzzled and angry. The baby crawled after him, shouting different sounds after him so that he would stop, because they must follow their strategy, share milk and get closer. But the brother kept moving further and further away from her, and the girl, who did not understand anything, desperately reached out to him with her hand, wondering why he was leaving so quickly. The child wanted to stop Dietrich so much that she shouted, "Brother," at the top of her voice, and did it in such a way that she accidentally released air from her anus. The heroine was wildly embarrassed, but thought that perhaps no one had heard this, so she tried to restrain herself so that it would not happen again. But she didn't succeed, and Anissa released gas again, drawing all the boys' attention to herself. Such a stone of shame fell on the little one that she bowed her head in horror, and in her heart she was already ready to cry and sink into the ground forever. She crossed her palms and begged God, if he still existed, to protect the dignity of this child into whom she had been reborn. Stinky heard her brother sigh heavily, and she felt even more ashamed that he apparently heard everything. Urik asked his competitor what his sister was doing, while Dietrich asked the girl what she was doing there. She realized that this was driving her crazy. Embarrassedly covering her flushed face, the little girl began to hope that they would leave soon, because the game was already over. But Dietrich approached her, and taking her in his arms, asked her to stand up and not lie on the floor. But Anissa, who had not yet recovered from the shame, in her mind begged her brother to put her in her place and just leave. The Lord of Shadows thought for a while, after which he said that it was good that at least there was no smell. Then he suggested that his sister change her diaper. The baby was so excited about this that she began to twitch, and the boy asked why she was struggling, and whether it was because she didn't want him to do this. The young master said that in this case she would stink. These words of his made the little one blush and get even angrier. In her thoughts, Anissa called Dietrich an ungrateful brother because she even brought him milk. But in the meantime, he asked his sister what was on her shoulder. Having examined the girl's luggage better, the young master realized that she had brought him milk again. He asked if she wanted him to drink it. She hummed, which meant agreement. Then the Lord of Shadows asked if she had come to share milk with him, to which she answered in the negative. The young master said that even if this was not the case, she shared cookies with Ulrich. Turning to his sister Dietrich, bowing his head sweetly, asked her if there were cookies for him too. The little girl can't believe that this cold-blooded child is also offended by her. Despite this, she prepares to get sweets for him, thinking that since the boy was looking at her so sweetly, he couldn't help but give him a treat. The girl was able to take out only the remaining sweet crumbs from her pocket. Anissa became embarrassed again and continued to rummage through her luggage, thinking that she probably dropped all the cookies on her way here. Realizing that she no longer had any other choice, the main character handed over the bottle of milk that she had left. Dietrich suddenly froze without uttering a word, and the girl began to shake the jar in front of his face, hinting to take it. She is shocked by how unstable her brother is. A minute ago, he was completely different. Suddenly, the unexpected happened. The bottle of milk opened, and the entire contents poured onto the boy's head, and the dishes themselves fell to the floor. The Lord of Shadows, putting his sister on the floor, began to wipe his wet face with his hand, and Anissa became convinced that, because of her guilt, she would soon turn into a corpse. The baby, trembling all over and covering her head, began to prepare for the worst and beg fate to allow her to be reborn in a normal family next time. But, surprisingly, nothing happened to her. Looking at her brother, she saw that he was calmly wiping his face with a handkerchief and was not going to kill her. Looking at his sister, the boy began to say that he wanted to tell her something important. She nodded approvingly, making it clear that she was paying attention. The girl thinks about what he wants to tell her. Instead of a long conversation, the future villain told the little one that in those moments when she was guilty, she should apologize. She simply gurgled, in her thoughts rejoicing that her brother was not going to kill her over something like this. The young gentleman asked Anissa if she was going to apologize, which puzzled her because she thought it was enough that she said, yeah. But very soon, Dietrich decided that she did not have to apologize because she probably did not do it on purpose. She nodded happily because it is much easier for her to pretend that she did it by accident. The boy, soaked to the skin, noticed Ulrich, who was still standing and looking at them. He winced when the Shadow Master asked why he was still here. The blonde turned around dissatisfied and said that he was just about to leave them. The main character looked at him in bewilderment, and the boy had already rushed away from the future villain and his sister. The little girl looked after Ulrich as he ran away, puzzled, but in fact she was glad that nothing terrible happened. She is pleased to realize that Dietrich's future right hand and Dietrich himself turned out to be not as scary as she imagined. Several months passed, and the palace in which the children live was still in good health. The matured Anissa looks at her reflection, namely at her baby teeth that have appeared. She sighed as her stomach growled loudly, for she was very hungry. The girl doesn't know exactly how old she is, but her second spring has arrived with the Lagranges. Thanks to the fact that she had already learned to speak more or less, the baby approached her servant Lancel and said that she was hungry. The man immediately handed over a bottle of milk, but she said that it was not food, because she wanted to chew something, because she was already 2 years old. The subordinate, calling the child a fool, said that it was just like food, and moreover, it was very difficult to get. Laying down on the sofa, he says that he is very tired, so he is going to take a little nap. Anissa still drank the mixture, but she was dissatisfied because she had already told the servant many times that she couldn't get enough of it, but he didn't seem to care. The girl became even more angry when she realized that Lancel fell asleep so quickly because he had eaten too much. He didn't wake up even when he was hit on the forehead. Leaving the empty bottle on the servant's head, the heroine decided that she had no choice but to go to the kitchen herself today. As soon as she was on the threshold of the kitchen, she looked around carefully, thanks to which she realized that there was no one in the room. Because of the delicious smell that she smelled, the little girl found sweets in the closet that Lancel had left so that he could eat them himself. Opening a jar of sweets, she thinks that adults are very petty because she can eat them before the servant arrives. The hungry girl was already preparing to eat her first chocolate bar, but she couldn't do it because a stranger appeared not far from her. It turned out to be the maid, Janine. With obvious irritation on her face, she asked the young lady what she was doing here. Seeing that the baby was doing something that, in her opinion, she was not supposed to, the girl angrily asked what she was eating. The maid said that she was eating her candies, and Anissa realized that in fact these candies were not Lancel's. Janine began to take away the jar of sweets from the child, ordering her not to eat other people's food, but the heroine, not intending to give up the chocolates, shouted that she didn't even eat them, but she believed that she was lying. Holding the jar with all her might, Anissa continued to desperately prove that she didn't even have time to try one thing. But the maid insisted on her own. While taking a bite of her sweets, she asks the child to stop lying and give her food. Suddenly, the jar breaks out of the girl's hands and falls to the floor, causing some of the candy to crumble under their feet. The maid was terribly angry that her favorite sweets were now crushed. The girl, biting her finger, thought that the maid just needed to give her some food, because she was going to eat even less than what had spilled on the floor. While the subordinate was busy with the fallen sweets, Anissa realized that she was very hungry when she licked the chocolate crumbs that remained on her fingers. She again reached for the sweets, hoping to take at least one to somehow satisfy her hunger. But Janine suddenly painfully pulled the girl's hand away, saying that she had already said that these were not her candies. The baby stroked her hand, which was red in pain. She felt so sad that tears rolled down her cheeks. The girl sternly asked the child what Lancel was teaching her, after which she irritably asked the unfortunate woman why she was crying. Anissa burst into tears as she felt even worse. She doesn't understand how someone can be so heartless towards her when no one in the palace even feeds her properly. Janine began to painfully pinch the crybaby on the cheek, saying that she shouldn't cry because she herself is a thief, which irritates her very much. Continuing to tightly squeeze the young mistress's skin, the servant says that if she does something bad, she will be punished. But the girl continued to make excuses. Finally, the maid released the poor baby and asked if Lancel was feeding her. The heroine said that that servant only feeds her milk, but Janine said that she didn't care and that she would have to lock the door to the kitchen. The maid had already begun to leave, but when the baby grabbed her by the dress, asking her to wait, she looked at her in disgust and asked what was the matter. She, stuttering a little, admitted that she was very hungry, but the girl asked her to speak correctly, after which Anissa repeated her words. The maid, pulling her dress away from the girl, said that she did not care, advising Anissa to eat wild animals in the forest, as the young master does. The subordinate hurriedly left, loudly slamming the door behind her, and the main character remained sitting on the floor, sobbing in hopelessness. Walking in the garden of withered roses and wiping her tears, the girl thinks that there is nothing to worry about, because it's spring. There should be some berries around. But when she came to the bushes, which, it would seem, should have at least some kind of fruit, she discovered that there was nothing edible around at all. Continuing to walk, the protagonist thought that it was spring, but unfortunately, not a single flower had bloomed yet, let alone fruit. Besides, it was a little cool, and this was the villain's favorite place. Anissa realized that she could not believe that children lived in such a gloomy place, and Dietrich, even with his abilities, could not eat properly. Suddenly, the girl came to the fountain, where she found her brother, who had just fried something tasty on the fire. Sitting down closer, the little girl greeted him and said that she missed him very much, but the young master asked who said that she could sit wherever she wanted. The boy asked her to forget about what he had just said, and the baby noticed that he had gained a little weight, which meant that bringing him milk was worth it. At this time, the Lord of Shadows was roasting a small quail on the fire, which turned out to be very appetizing and golden. The hungry heroine looked at this dish with burning eyes, and the young master asked her why she was drooling so disgustingly. The poor thing immediately wiped her lips and apologized for looking disgusting, but Dietrich said that he did not call her vile. Assuming that the sister was very hungry, the talented magician handed her the prepared food, offering her a snack. The girl, despite her strong desire, waved her hands and said that she would not eat, because this was the food that he had originally prepared for himself. But he took her refusal too easily, which is why he immediately began to eat the fried meat himself. The orphan was very surprised, because in fact, she wanted to eat. She realized he wasn't asking twice. Anissa, asking her brother if it was delicious, thought that she just had to say yes. He said that it was very tasty for him, and the girl pouted at this, sarcastically thinking that she was very happy for him. The little one realized that her brother was not going to leave her anything, but she was completely convinced of this when she saw that he had completely eaten all the meat. The young master, noticing the strange redness on the girl's face, asked what happened to her face, to which she muttered that she had been pinched. Dietrich asked who did it, and Anissa replied that it was Janine. The heroine thought that her protector was the only one who treated her normally. The young wizard asked if she meant his maid, to which the girl replied that she did. The boy asked why she pinched her like that. The little girl admitted that she was scolded because she tried to eat the chocolates that belonged to the servant, but they all fell to the floor. She thought that, no matter how you look at it, pinching a child's cheek so painfully was too cruel, and the Lord of Shadows responded to her words with a simple, "I see." Dietrich suddenly stood up from his seat, and the main character asked where he was going. Looking at his sister, and thinking that her hair looked like cotton candy, he replied that he was going to the palace, after which she said that she would go with him, but the young magician said that it would be better if she stayed here. The boy promises his sister to return, so he says that she just needs to wait for him. The baby agreed with him, and the Shadow Wizard himself headed towards the palace. After a short time, the Lord of Shadows came into a cold, shabby corridor and stopped there in front of one of the doors. A frightening coal-black aura appeared around the future villain, and he himself, before entering, drew conclusions, because he was told that she could not be killed. Suddenly, Dietrich burst into the maid's room, who not only entered, but knocked down the door with his shadow power, causing the girl to scream loudly. Seeing the young master, whose face did not reflect any emotion, among the rising smoke and dust, Janine wanted to ask him what was happening, but she didn't succeed, as the shadow's hand grabbed her throat. The heir says that he doesn't care if she and Lancel line their pockets with money. The boy also added that he doesn't care whether she looks down on him or not. He claims that her behavior is not worth a single second of his. But Dietrich said that the fact that they were starving that little girl was a completely different story. The Lord of Shadows admits that although this girl is very annoying at times, he would never want her to starve to death. At this time, Anissa, barely holding back her tears, in her head calls her brother a complete idiot, because several hours have passed and he still hasn't returned. Trembling all over, she remembers that Dietrich asked her to wait near the fountain until the end, although she would freeze to death before she starved to death. Unable to sit still and freeze any longer, the little girl stood up, deciding that she would also go to the palace, and that her protector was a complete traitor. Rushing home, the girl became even sadder because she was very cold and very hungry. Some time has passed, and the servant Lancel, surprisingly, joyfully presents his little mistress with the food that she so wanted. She was very happy and took the bun with pleasure. She is happy that they finally brought her something that she can chew, wondering what suddenly came over his servant, that he became so kind. Lance also asked the lady to drink some milk, although just a couple of days ago, he was complaining that it was difficult for him to get milk. Having tasted the bread, the heroine began to cry from how delicious it turned out to be. Now she understands Yurik, who is so happy with a simple cookie. Since Anissa now has bread, she can give Dietrich more milk, for which she ran to his bedroom, but he immediately said that he did not want it. The little one began to rummage in her pocket, thinking that her brother was still an individual who was very difficult to please. She took out a bag of cookies from her pocket, which she offered to her friend. The girl thinks that even though he is lazy, she will give them to him. The boy asked his sister where she got them, to which she, with great pride, from which everything just glowed, said that she had stolen them. The young magician, taking the bottle from the child, told her to eat her cookies herself, and he would only drink milk. He quickly drank the entire contents of the jar, and the main character was happy that this time he was drinking the mixture well. The little lady felt great pride in the fact that she was feeding and thus raising her friend. But when she thought that when her brother grew up, he would become a successful villain, the thought suddenly confused and frightened her. The girl swallowed anxiously, hoping that everything would be fine if he did become that antagonist. Looking at Dietrich, who has already finished his milk, she thinks that even if he becomes a villain, he will probably treat her better. While picking up her bottle, the baby also reflects that if everything doesn't turn out the way she expected, then all the effort she put in was wasted. Having treated her brother to milk as she wanted, Anissa had already said goodbye to him and was about to leave. But suddenly, she heard the Lord of Shadows modestly call out to her. She turned around in bewilderment, wondering why Dietrich called her not by name, but simply, "Hey." The boy asked his sister to come closer to him, and she became even more indignant because he didn't even seem to know her name. Running back to her defender, the protagonist says that her name is actually Anissa, but for some reason he did not immediately understand what she meant. When he asked what Anissa meant, the little girl frowned irritably with anger. She shouted out touchily that it was her name, but at that moment Dietrich suddenly extended his hand to her, where he hid some object in his palm. When he opened it, the heroine saw a beautiful, juicy, ripe cherry. The young master asked his sister if she could eat something like this. Taking the berry in her hands, the little one said that she could chew it, after which she thanked her friend, thinking that he seemed to already like it. She called her brother the best man in the world, to which he readily agreed, after which she thanked him again for the treat. The girl happily ate the cherry, but suddenly became thoughtful when Dietrich said that it really looked like a chicken. She was amazed that he compared her to this animal, but in the meantime, the young wizard asked his sister if he should give her everything he had. She of course agreed, after which the boy began to rummage in his pockets. The future villain handed his friend a few more berries, and Anissa wondered if he said she looked like a chicken. Didn't that mean he thought she was cute? The baby began to cry because the sweet and sour taste of cherries was the best thing she had ever eaten, and Dietrich, noticing this, asked why she was crying. She stated that she was not crying, remembering that she had always only had rye bread and milk, and she could only dream of such delicious berries. Suddenly, the young lady noticed that her brother was peering intently into her face to see whether she was crying or not. The girl, beaming with joy, said that she really wasn't crying, and the cherries he treated her to were very tasty. Then the boy asked if all children were like her. Anissa didn't understand what he meant, so she thought he was saying that cuties like her were rare. Looking into the thoughtful face of the heir, she already thought that he was really attracted by her cuteness. Suddenly, the boy said that he could not answer this question, since all the children except her were dead. The heroine is shocked that he spoke about this. The lady tried to jump onto her brother's bed with a smile, pretending that she had not just heard anything disgusting. But she couldn't immediately jump onto the bed, because it was too high for her height. The unfortunate woman was left hanging on the edge, ready to fall. Everything worked out for her when Dietrich grabbed her clothes and sat her down on the bed. The little girl felt very grateful to him for this, and assumed that he was now kind to her in his own way. She huddled closer to her protector to celebrate. This is called the mere exposure effect, where people are naturally attracted to other people they encounter frequently. The heroine is proud that when Lancel was not looking after her, she came to her brother and was next to him, which is why the Velcro effect was created. Dita had already begun to think that the moment had come when all her efforts could be recognized as not in vain, but the boy suddenly moved away from her irritably. Without thinking of retreating, the protagonist grabbed Dietrich into his arms, thanking him for his hospitality with a smile, but he only asked her to leave quickly. As usual, without pronouncing some of the letters in the words, she thanked him again, especially for the cherries, and admitted that she liked him. While Anissa could not believe that the future villain was picking berries especially for her, the Lord of Shadows once again asked her to leave behind. He wanted to push his sister away with his hand, but she hugged her, thinking that it was more pleasant to see a bad child doing a good deed, rather than an initially good one. The little one began to repeat how much she liked her brother, but he indifferently said that he didn't care about it. Anissa thought that he couldn't be that cold because his bones would freeze, but she still looks in the mirror and is amazed at how cute she is. While the young lady was wondering why he didn't think she was cute, and whether it was because they weren't alike, Dietrich asked if she would like some more cherries. She cheerfully agreed, thinking that if the heir now offers her food like this, then this is already a big step forward. While the sister was gobbling up the berries, laughing cheerfully, the boy said that she had a good appetite. Suddenly, the brother's words made the heroine shudder. He says that he took these cherries from another palace, and they did not seem to be poisoned. The little girl, completely shocked by what her brother told her, fearfully asked him if he had given her poisoned food. He said with amazing calmness that he didn't know, and Anissa thought what a vile person he was. She was in such a stupor that she simply silently trembled all over, amazed at what an ungrateful scoundrel this boy was. She wanted him to return to her all the milk that she brought him. The lady remembers that among the Lagrange heirs there is only one rule, not to kill servants, which means that the methods of killing competitors need not be hidden. Looking fearfully at the cherries, she realizes that breaking into another palace and poisoning food is a common occurrence. This happens about 3-4 times a week. The protagonist closed her eyes because she thought that the food was really poisoned and she would soon die. But suddenly, she heard her brother chuckle. This made her very angry because he dares to laugh even when she thinks that she is about to die. Smiling slightly, Dietrich reassured his sister that everything was fine because the game of killing the brothers was over, and all the candidates knew that he would not die from poison. The main character was embarrassed that he was talking about this, laughing as if it was nothing at all. Thanks to the novel, Anissa remembered that the reason her brother was resistant to poisons was because his mother, Camille, poisoned him every day. She also remembers that it was such a strange family tradition that she felt sick just reading about it in a book. Suddenly, a maid enters the room, whom the girl simply called Mevin. The girl was surprised to find the young mistress here again. The little one happily threw herself into the maid's arms because she had come to play with her, and Mevin said that if she ran like that, she would fall and get hurt. The worker asked the lady how she could be so beautiful, to which she said that she also liked her nanny. They talked about whether the baby came here on her own, and Anissa said yes. The maid complained about Lancel, who was unclear what he was doing at this time, and Dietrich was quietly watching them at that moment. Hugging her beloved maid, the girl glanced at her brother, and for some reason it seemed to her that she felt his cold gaze. But when he turned away, she thought that she must have imagined it, because his aura remained the same as always, calm and gray. Mevin invited the young lady to take her to her room, to which she agreed. In fact, this girl's name is Marilyn. It's just that the heroine cannot pronounce her name properly. She is the first adult Anissa has become attached to. Waving goodbye to the air, she cannot believe that such a good servant as Mevin has come to replace Jenin, who suddenly disappeared. Although the little girl said goodbye to her brother, he did not react at all. The maid laughed and told the young master that she would take the lady and come back. The heroine in her thoughts called Dietrich a fool, joking that she didn't care about him because she had a loving servant with whom she left his room. Some time passes. The cheerful main character runs up to the Lord of Shadows, who is spending time at the fountain as usual, and calls out to him. But the girl suddenly froze, because her brother began to correct the way she pronounced his name. She repeated his name the way she usually pronounces it, but he told her to say it correctly every time. The lady doesn't understand what came over him suddenly. No matter how incorrectly Anissa pronounced the words, she still decided to tell her friend what worries her so much. Her beloved Mevin has gone somewhere. The heroine asked where her servant had gone, but the boy asked which one, and she, pronouncing the words poorly, said that she meant his subordinate, but then realized that he was deliberately teasing her like that. The girl said that she really missed this maid. She realizes that Dietrich and Marilyn are the only ones who communicate with her in this palace. The protagonist is pleased that her beloved nanny considers her beautiful, unlike her brother, although she is also consoled by the fact that at least he does not ignore her as before. The Lord of Shadows never looks for his sister, as the maid does, in order to read fairy tales to her, play with dolls, or tell her some story. The little girl decided that she needed to explore this world, for example, learn more about other families, or about the legend of the Shadow Devil, because she was very curious about it. The young magician asked the little one not to cry because of this, but she said that she didn't cry anyway. It seems to her that her brother considers her a crybaby. Dietrich asked why she liked that maid so much, to which the little one replied that she read books to her and told her stories. The boy thought about something, after which he stated that she seemed to be missing toys. The heroine thought that this was not what she actually meant, but the Lord of Shadows had already begun to summon someone with the help of his magic. The child was very surprised when he saw a huge halo appear on the ground, which foreshadowed the appearance of something otherworldly. A large, black, arched demon appeared from the portal and asked the young master if he had summoned him. The boy said yes, and the girl guessed that Baal was the king of demons from the novel. The entity asked its owner why he called him, to which he ordered him to play with his sister. The demon did not immediately understand what was being said. Dietrich repeated his order, and Anissa was amazed that he was asking the demon king himself to play with her, despite the fact that the latter was also nervous in front of him. The spirit asked if he wanted him to relieve the young lady of boredom, to which he said yes. The girl was even more shocked, because she didn't want this. The evil spirit said that they understood their task, after which they approached the child, but the baby was very scared of this, because the demon gave off an aura of death. But suddenly, a black rattle appeared in the spirit's hand, and he asked if he should shake it. Without waiting for an answer, the demon began to dance with the rattles, but the protagonist thought that even though he asked, he began to shake the toy at will. Anissa is torn between two feelings. She is scared, and at the same time, for some reason, she likes the rhythm that her juggler makes. She did her best not to show her admiration to everyone, but she didn't succeed, because laughter burst out of her, and Dietrich smiled contentedly. A few hours later, the main character is shocked by what Lancel told her. The girl furiously asks why her favorite servant Mevin was fired, to which the man said that he knew nothing more. Ever since Anissa was born, this girl had been the first adult to treat her well. Lance asks why she is so worried, because it is only the maid, but she maliciously called him an idiot. The subordinate was stunned that the petty heiress called him an idiot. He asked the young lady to repeat what she had just said. The heroine, without hiding her raging anger, shouted that she was a complete idiot and a blockhead. He took a deep breath and asked what he should do about it now, because he was such a fool that he forgot to order food for her ladyship today. With a disgusting smile, he told the girl that she had no choice but to starve today. But before the poor baby even had time to say anything, the food delivery man immediately closed the doors behind him, leaving the child to his own devices. Anissa was in such a stupor that she couldn't even find the words to say anything. She wondered why the hell this scoundrel hadn't been kicked out of the palace yet. She was angry with Derek because instead of firing Lancel, who teases the child and starves him, he kicked out the good Mevin. Deciding that she urgently needed to tell her brother, she knocked on his room, even though he once asked her not to bother him over trifles. Deciding that he would not open the door even if she knocked, the girl herself rushed towards him, joyfully shouting his name. But then she immediately felt a breath of wind coming from the open windows. The heroine decided that opening the windows was stupid because the house was not heated. Bent over from the cold, the heroine once again called out to the air, thinking about where he could have gone, also leaving all the windows open. But suddenly she heard her brother's strange, heavy breathing, thanks to which she realized that he was here, but was not answering her. The girl found her friend on the bed, who clearly did not feel healthy. He had a high temperature and was having difficulty breathing. The young lady suggested that he was most likely ill, and even the blanket was not keeping him warm enough. The young magician was surprised to see his sister, and she said that his blanket must be thick. The boy angrily ordered her to get lost, but she, hiding her displeasure, said that he was so nice to her. The Lord of Shadows asked her to remove the blanket, but she refused to do so since it was cold in his room. Anissa asked if he had any medicine. The patient asked the heroine to take off the blanket from him and leave, but the baby said that she did not want to leave him because she was worried that he was sick. The Lord of Shadows repeated that he wanted her to get lost, and she already said that she would leave, but only after she brought him water. Noticing a basin of water, she exhaled with relief, but she was puzzled by the fact that the servants brought water for washing and left the sick child alone. Having soaked a piece of cloth in water, she thought how inhuman the servants were. They left it even though the cold is a terrible disease in children. The girl put a wet towel on Dietrich's hot forehead, but he got angry that she was too wet, for which the little one apologized. The young wizard threw the rag away, shouting displeasedly that he had already asked her to stop doing this several times. But Anissa unexpectedly thanked him for squeezing out the excess water in this way, and then put the towel back on his forehead. After a while, when the girl covered her brother's bed with warm pillows and lay down next to her, the talented magician asked if she was going to leave. The girl, laughing, replied that he was cold, and he would warm up when she hugged him, because when it's cold, you just need to hug someone. Crossing her arms over her chest, the young lady said that he should hug himself if he didn't have someone to hug with. Suddenly, Dietrich got up from the bed and kicked his sister out of bed, telling her to get lost. He carefully sat her down on a chair, saying that she was so noisy that it gave him a headache. The patient left, and the main character thought that he was really very bad, so she said that she would not make any more noise. After a while, Anissa knocked again on the Lord of the Shadows' room, who was surprised that she could not enter because the door was closed. In fact, the boy locked her so she wouldn't come in again. When he opened the door and looked at his sister, he saw her on the floor with a bunch of branches. She smiled happily and asked if he was awake. The patient recalled that he seemed to ask her not to make noise, but the baby stated that she did not make a sound. Then the gentleman asked her why she brought this garbage with her from the street, but she said that it was firewood that she had collected for him. Looking at the way his sister smiled, Dietrich thought that she might be stupid, but he had some doubts about this. He still let the girl into his room, resigned himself, and tells her to do what she wants. The heir thinks that he is stupid because of the rising fever. Very quickly the dark night came, and the brother and sister slept peacefully on the bed. But it would seem that they were not destined to sleep safely today, because someone's frightening silhouette suddenly appeared in the window. An unknown person, who was about to get to the children through the window, threw a sharp knife towards Dietrich, but he immediately stopped him with the help of a shadow. The attacker, equipped with a high-end uniform and equipment, was scared like a coward as soon as he saw the power of the shadow of the future villain. The demon lord then caused the stranger to die instantly from his black magic alone, with his blood splashing everywhere. The boy was slightly amazed that he was not even allowed to sleep peacefully, and the heroine was sleeping so soundly that she did not even wake up and did not suspect that a guest had just arrived. Looking at his sleeping friend, he thinks what a fool she is, because she spent the whole day looking for Mevin, who, in fact, was sent to kill her. The young wizard cannot understand this girl at all, why she likes the maid more than the demon Baal, who surpasses her in everything, and why she likes to sleep here. He wondered if it was because she was untalented, or because she was trying to survive under his protection. The magician is sure that no one could have told her to do this. Remembering his girlfriend's face, the young master thinks that he always thought that she knew about his situation. The master thought that although this irritated him, he was protecting this child not only because of related blood. Another reason why he takes care of her is that there is another rule for the future heir. Sacrifice something important. Asmodeus, a demon who protects his family, wanted Duke Lagrange to be like a demon, someone who would only care about his own strength. Some, like Mr. Derrick, sacrificed their lovers, friends, or even family members to the demons they have tamed so that Asmodeus will recognize them. For the sake of his goal, Dietrich must cast aside his humanity. But suddenly, he thought about what would happen if he didn't have anything important to donate. A shadow that appeared from the floor told the owner that in this case he would end up like Spring Lagrange. The entity notifies that this man was much more suitable than Derrick, but he could not pass the test because he did not have anything to sacrifice. Baal subtly hints to the boy that his sister appeared at a very opportune time and advises him to treasure her. Dietrich asked the demon if he really thought that they could deceive Mr. Lagrange in this way, to which he replied that yes. Shadow said that they would be able to deceive not only Derrick, but also Asmodeus, who evaluates candidates because people tend to value their family, and they will unconditionally accept this. But suddenly, Baal added that there was one thing that the young master was very interested in. The entity tells the owner that he should not keep his sister too close to him. The young Shadow Lord grinned and asked his subordinate if he was joking, because for him, her safety was not more important than his. Baal looked at the sweetly sleeping main character and called her an unfortunate princess. Gently stroking his sister with his hand, the boy says that from the very beginning he planned to use her as a sacrifice in order to become an heir. Suddenly, he felt a strange pain in his heart. Feeling this, he already thought that he had been poisoned, but he did not notice. Continuing to stroke the baby's head, the young wizard thought that he should be careful. After a while, one carefree day, the demon hands the joyful Anissa her bottle of milk, calling her his princess. She was very happy, because this time Dietrich's employee made her milk with strawberry flavor. The lady was delighted that the demon only needed to shake the bottle for the taste to change, and the next taste should be chocolate. Tiny believes that Baal is not a bad nanny, even though he has an ominous aura. The evil spirit asked the girl if she liked it, to which she replied that she really did. But why did she ask why he called her princess? The entity replied that she was the real princess, because, after all, she was His Majesty's younger sister. Anissa asked if he was the king. He replied that Dietrich is the king of demons, subordinate to the supreme ruler. He was chosen by him, and thus he is the king, and she is the princess. The main character, wondering in her mind that the demon king chose her brother, who was barely 7 years old, says that he apparently likes Dietrich. Baal, smiling sarcastically and picking up several books with the help of his power, said that it was not that he liked this boy very much. The girl, who was lifted up by the magical power of evil spirits, asked what was the matter. Sitting the child on his lap, the demon tells the little one that he heard that Maven often read to her, and his master ordered him to do so too. The protagonist thought about what she sat on. At first, she thought it was her knee, but then she assumed it was her hip, because it was very soft and comfortable for her. Anissa began to touch the demon's body, thinking it was like a marshmallow, but Baal asked her not to do so. The little lady asked why. When the evil spirit said that these were his genitals, she immediately removed her hand and apologized. It turns out that demons have genitals and can have children. The demon told the child that nothing bad had happened, then asked which book he should start with. And the lady thought that probably, because she herself was inside the book, she knew all the fairy tales that there were. In the end, the little girl pointed to a book called Little Rabbit in the Moon, and Baal supported her choice, saying that he liked it too. But as soon as the princess picked up the fairy tale, the shadow suddenly began to evaporate, preparing to leave the girl, who did not understand anything, with herself. The demon explained to the lady that if he was seen in this form, his reputation would be shaken, after which he wished to see her later. Anissa thought that she had not even heard any footsteps, and he had already disappeared. Suddenly, the baby heard her favorite servant calling out to her. The main character jumped up when she realized it was Marilyn. She wondered why she came back if, as she knows, she was fired. The door to the room was opened by a maid who, in an unfamiliar voice, told the child that they had not seen each other for a long time. Mevin, whose aura has changed to a frightening blood red, says that after Dietrich fired her, she had to go to the north. The girl intimidatingly extended her hand to the girl and asked if she would go with her, but she was afraid of her and even stepped back. The maid, continuing to persistently extend her hand, repeated her request, but more harshly. Anissa became even more scared. She did not dare to have any contact with her once beloved nanny. She realized that something had changed in her. With a frightening look, calmness and friendliness, she asked the little lady where she was going. But when the girl just wanted to say that she didn't want to, Marilyn fiercely grabbed her hand and loudly ordered her to do what she told her. The little lady was so frightened that she screamed loudly and called Dietrich. The maid grabbed the trembling baby by the shoulders and declared that she did not need to be afraid, because it was she and not someone else. The girl asked if everything was okay. Looking into the soulless eyes of the maid, the frightened heroine thinks that Mevin looks very strange. After all, she cannot even focus her gaze. The maid rushed into the girl's arms, but she assumed that it seemed that someone else was controlling her aura because she looked unnatural. Tiny thought that she needed to cleanse her just like Lancel. When she tried to do this, she immediately began to succeed. The red color began to dissipate, and Marilyn herself screamed heart-rendingly. The maid reacted unusually. She dug her nails into the child's back. Anissa was very hurt by this, but she was happy that everything was working out for her. The protagonist quickly got out of the prickly embrace and continued to try to dispel the aura, because she almost succeeded in doing it. As a result, she was able to completely clear the maid's energy. She and the girl fell wearily to the floor, gasping for breath. Thinking about why her beloved nanny was suffering so much, because with Lancel it was different, Anissa began to tug at Mevin, asking her to come to her senses quickly. But she suddenly turned her gaze to the girl. Her eyes no longer looked frightening, but on the contrary, they filled with bitter tears. The unfortunate subordinate burst into tears loudly, anxiously asking herself what she was going to do, and the little one asked her why she was crying. Trembling all over, the maid began to ask the young lady for forgiveness, but she told her to stop crying, thinking that she had done nothing wrong. But the tears did not stop flowing from the worker's eyes, and she started talking about how she really didn't want this. Then, the girl hugged her comfortingly, but suddenly, some unknown force powerfully threw the maid back, so that her back hit the wall painfully. The little lady was very surprised by this surprise. In tears, she wanted to rush to Mevin's aid, but then the hand of a certain boy appeared in front of her. It turned out to be Dietrich himself, who, with constant calm and composure, told the girl that it seems she doesn't value her life at all. The worker, seeing him, immediately began to apologize, and Anissa, finding herself in her brother's arms, was not content with the fact that he did not appear when she called for help, but came when everything was almost settled. But the main character suddenly became thoughtful when she heard her nanny admit that she really served Lady Leatrice. This woman is the birth mother of Ulrich Lagrange and Derek's first wife. She ranks second in the Lagrange family and never loses. Without raising her head from the floor, the maid continues to repeat that she truly valued my lady. But Dietrich asked if she was denying that she had been spying on them all this time. Anissa cannot believe that her beloved nanny turned out to be a spy. Looking at the maid, the heroine now understands why her brother kicked her out of the palace. But judging by her aura, she is sure that the maid really loves her. Suddenly, the heroine noticed that the defender was about to use his ability. She became scared because she thought that he was going to kill Mevin. The little girl began to pull the Lord of Shadows by the hair and shout that this was not right, and he couldn't do this, but he asked in surprise why. The future villain, having put his sister on the floor and getting ready to use his power again, menacingly asked her not to get in her way. The protagonist, covering the servant with herself, through tears ordered her friend not to kill Marilyn, but he calmly asked why he should not do this. He again asked the little one to move away, but she did not obey him, but continued to proudly stand in her place. But the subordinate herself pushed the child away from her, asking the young master to punish her because the princess really doesn't know anything. The girl again asked her brother not to kill her favorite. The girl desperately asked the boy to believe that she was under the control of Lady Leatrice, and Anissa realized that, as she had thought, she was being controlled. The subordinate stated that the demon of Lady Veronica, Leatrice's daughter, was to blame for everything, and she herself would never have done such a thing because the girl was dear to her. Dietrich objected that this demon was very strong, and she would never have been able to cope with his hypnosis on her own. Mevin said it was possible, but her mind was clouded, but now the veil had lifted. She assumes that Veronica simply stopped controlling her. The little girl thought about whether she should tell her that she has the gift of Heredia, because in this way she would explain that she herself cleansed Marilyn's aura. But the next moment she doubted, because she thought that as soon as she opened her mouth, Dietrich would kill her, as happened to her in the book. The lady tells her brother that if he kills the servant, she will hate him. She is offended that she is crying out of hopelessness, but hopes that this will help. But he, frowning his eyebrows in bewilderment, asked her again about what she wanted to convey to him. The heroine loudly shouted that she would always hate him, and would no longer bring him milk, and would also tell everyone about his demon bowl. After this, the maid fell head first to the floor and began to beg the young master to have mercy, because she promised not to report them to Lady Leatrice again. The child rushed to the nanny to calm her down, and Dietrich, answering the maid's pleas with a simple and irritated "okay," turned around and walked away from them. Marilyn, tearfully hugging the girl, thanked God that everything worked out. She repented to Anissa, but she, sobbing with her, asked her to stop. The heroine thought that the threat about Baal, as she wanted, had worked. The fact is that no one should know about the existence of a demon that is as strong as Guerra himself, the sun god, until Dietrich becomes duke. Evening came, and the sun's rays fell on the carpet in the corridor, along which the Lord of Shadows walked, deep in thought about something. His memory flashes to his sister, who, with tears welling up in her eyes and with raging anger, says that she will hate him. A smile appeared on the boy's face. He mockingly asked himself in his thoughts whether this girl was serious at that moment. The young magician wondered what was special about the maid who was watching over them. The baby was so preoccupied with her that she didn't even look at him. As he continues walking, he decides that this is stupid and hopes that his sister doesn't think he stopped because of her, because right now he doesn't feel like dealing with her. For Dietrich, this little crybaby is just a sacrifice so that he can become a duke. He doesn't even consider her to be a person, just like his family. The future villain, frowning, convinces himself once again that he stopped not because Anissa stood in his way. Several months have passed since the recent events. From the Garden of Withered Roses, you can hear the screams of a child who seems to be desperately fighting with someone. It turns out that this is the main character, who is already 3 years old and who is practicing her sword skills, and Boal supports her by clapping his hands. The demon praised the young lady for her excellent sword skills, after which she smiled smugly and thought that she had talent. He advised the girl not to open herself when she raised the sword, and when the little girl did everything right, the evil spirits praised her again. The protagonist thinks that although she knew that Baal was a demon swordsman, she did not know that he would make such a good teacher. She also didn't think she'd be able to persuade him with cookies. Gathering all her strength, the young warrior swung at the teacher. She looked powerful, partly because the demon had strengthened her arm with a spell. The girl began to wave her sword near the shadow, but he, without ceasing to smile, pretended that he was in great pain and that his opponent was so afraid. The demon fell to the ground, saying with feigned disappointment that he seemed to have lost again, but Anissa, catching her breath, said that she didn't even hurt him. Baal continued to say with mockery that this could not be, because he was in great pain, but the main character was angry that he was lying to her. The little girl began to stomp her feet displeasedly and tell her teacher that he had not lost, but he said that he was already sweating. She angrily ordered him to stop sweating because he looked too dirty, after which the demon immediately apologized. Suddenly, the embarrassed entity began to say that he would really like to fight with her, but Dietrich told him something. The little one asked Baal what her brother told him, but he suddenly replied that it was nothing. This made the heroine very angry. Because the demon refused to tell her the truth, Anissa became completely furious, but he mockingly asked her not to be angry. The sulky girl walked through the Garden of Withered Roses, away from the teacher, wondering what Dietrich said. But at one moment, the little girl's attention was attracted by something interesting, a hole in the wall. The lady wondered how long she had been here. The princess wondered where this hole led and wondered if she should ask Paul about it. But the young traveler realized that she did not need to ask either him, her brother, or Marilyn about this, because they still would not let her go. The naughty girl boldly climbed through the hole, thinking that if this wall was in the garden, then there must also be a garden on the other side. But as soon as she found herself on the other side, she was delighted with what a luxurious garden she found herself in, and how different it was from before. Anissa liked the golden statue near the fountain, whose eyes are made of diamonds. She also feels a strange aura, but thinks it's because she's surrounded by such luxury. As she approached the monument, she thought about whether she should steal one gem, because then her financial situation would improve. But the girl began to think that even if this garden belonged to the Lagranges, she could not think that they had such an elegant garden all this time. Realizing that she had entered Lady Leatrice's garden, the protagonist immediately ran back, thinking that she had already gone completely crazy. However, she was unable to leave her arrival unnoticed. Nearby, she heard dissatisfied voices calling out to her. Fortunately, the main character managed to hide behind a wall, but nearby she hears sounds as if someone is being beaten, but no one is screaming. She hears the voice of one of the bullies, who orders the victim to close his blue eyes before he claws them out. Based on her blue eyes, the little girl was able to immediately guess who was on the other side of the wall and who was unlucky enough to get caught by the robbers. Looking out from hiding, she noticed Yurik, who was being kicked by other boys and shouting to him that he was a disgrace, since he could not even hit Dietrich. Soon the bullies left, leaving the poor young man alone, and the protagonist, who had been watching them all this time, realized how close they were. The girl looked out harder to make sure that her guess was correct, and, as she had expected, the victim turned out to be Yurik, who was lying helplessly on the ground. The boy, hearing rustling noises nearby, turned around in fear and asked who was there, when he suddenly saw the young Madame Lagrange next to him. Looking at the face of an old acquaintance, Anissa was struck by how much he had grown. Sitting down next to her, she asked her friend if he was in pain, but he did not answer her, but only looked stunned at the guest who had suddenly appeared. The girl, thinking that he might have already forgotten about her, introduced herself smilingly, but he asked in surprise whether she was really that same child. Yurik asked if she was really Dietrich's younger sister, to which she replied that yes. Then he asked his friend what she was doing here. The young lady thought, and the young man, perplexed, jumped up from his seat and repeated his question. The little girl said that she was very bored. Cheerfully pointing her finger at the hole in the wall, she says that she simply walked through this hole and ended up here, which amazes her friend even more. The young master, taking the heroine by the hand, led her back to the hole, excitedly telling her that she should not be here because she would get into trouble. He added that she would be killed if spotted in this place. The little one asked in bewilderment why they should kill her. Yurik explained that it's all because she is from the Dahlia Palace, and Leatrice's children hate everyone from there, especially Alphonse, Dietrich's main enemy. Anissa remembers that outside the game, they are not allowed to kill each other. She wanted to ask something, thinking that Alphonse is the eldest son of Leatrice. He despises Dietrich, since they are rivals, but she knows nothing about Yurik. Assuming that the blonde shouldn't hate her since she treated him to cookies, the protagonist asked him if he hated her like the other children. The young lady noticed that the boy was embarrassed. She thought that he should be kind, but perhaps he didn't like her face. The girl wanted to change the topic of conversation, so she asked Yurik why those hooligans beat him if he was not a stranger, but he suddenly became frighteningly silent. The little girl already thought that she had said something wrong, but then the young master sadly replied that it was because he had blue eyes. Suddenly, something happens that the boy was not prepared for. The child grabbed him by the tie and pulled him towards him to look closely into his eyes. The blonde turned away embarrassedly and irritably asked his friend what she was staring at, but she started talking about the fact that he had a very beautiful eye color. Yurik asked again, puzzled, and the little lady replied that his blue eyes looked very beautiful. He again asked what she meant. The main character, leading him by the hand to the fountain, repeated that their beauty was simply off the charts. The girl asked him to look at her eyes through the reflection in the water, hoping that he would be convinced that their color was simply beautiful. The young man looked away from the surface of the water, saying that this is not so, and only those scum from the south have such eyes. The girl asked what difference it made, who else had the same iris color, but he still insisted. Anissa thought that, after all, the fault of her friend's complex was that the Lagrange family hated Southerners. But suddenly, she heard a familiar voice calling out to her. It turned out to be Dietrich himself, who had a wound on his cheek. His appearance slightly frightened Yurik, but Anissa was very happy about him. The girl asked her brother what happened to his cheek, but he once again strictly repeated his question. What was she doing in such a place? Turning his attention to the blonde, the Lord of Shadows asked if he had brought the young mistress here, but he only flinched in shock at such an accusation. The main character instead admitted that she herself came here alone, and when the young magician asked why, she said that she was just bored. He seemed to be angered by his sister's words. He asked why she was bored. Dietrich recalled that he allowed her to be with Ball, but she thought that he was only her teacher and nanny, although if he had heard this, he would have burst into tears. The young lady decided to change the topic, so she decided to ask her brother, taking his finger, who hit him, but he coldly said that no one. The protagonist still continued to ask her defender about who abused him, because she would take revenge on them, but he continued to remain silent. He asked the girl how she was going to avenge him, to which Anissa said that Bal was teaching her how to use a sword, and she would try very hard. The Lord of Shadows sighed heavily, and the young lady giggled, thinking that this scoundrel was mocking her. Dietrich, taking his sister in his arms, said that this was no longer important, and they should return to their native palace. But Uric, meanwhile, seems to have realized something. The blonde thought that, apparently, the rumors were true. He heard gossip about how the Lagrange heir had something valuable, namely, that he treasured his younger sister, whom Camilla died giving birth to. The boy finds it incredible that any of the Lagranges would care so much about their relatives, and he is thinking about reporting everything to his mother. Looking at how the girl joyfully waves goodbye to him, Uric thinks that if he puts pressure on Dietrich's weakness, his determination will diminish. Suddenly, his aura began to change from red to yellow, and he himself began to wonder why Anissa was waving at him like that. The blonde hesitantly clenched his fist, thinking that he would not report this to his mother for now, because, after all, he was not completely sure of everything. Several days passed. Anissa, lying on the bed, thinks that she has been here for 3 years, but besides the Delia Palace, she has only seen the Leatrice Palace. Jumping out of bed with enthusiasm, she asked the maid if she could look at Vaughan Castle. The young lady's request was very surprising at first. The heroine was delighted when Marilyn replied that she could visit him, and she was just about to go there for sugar, and they could go together. Sometime later, while near Vaughan Castle, the maid asks the little girl to wait for her on a bench and not to go anywhere until she returns. As she left, the girl once again told her to wait, because she could easily get lost, since Vaughan Castle was huge, and the lady promised that she would not budge. But as soon as Mevin left the field of view, the girl immediately got off the bench, wanting to look around a little, because she was much more interested here than at home. But suddenly, her attention was attracted by a loud cry from a man who called someone the son of a slave, and asked where he was going. The voice continued to shout at someone that he shouldn't even dare to look at him like that, and the main character looked out of her hide and seeked to understand what was going on. There was an unshakable Dietrich, whom a certain man, holding by his collar, scolded for daring to attack Mr. Alphonse. Anissa was very surprised when she saw that the one being bullied was her brother, who was also called a shameless brat. The man shouts to the young man that if he didn't have the power of a demon, then no one would need such trash as him, but the boy tolerates his bullying. The enraged adult threw the child to the ground, and the protagonist continued to watch everything. Turning some keys in his hands, the knight says that usually they are worn only during classes, but he believes that for Dietrich, even a couple of hours will not be enough. The man left, ordering the heir Lagrange to think about his behavior. He left the young master alone with a certain chain that bound his hands. Leatrice's subordinate left, and Anissa immediately ran out to her brother and asked if he was injured, to which he indifferently asked how she ended up here. The heroine said that she came here with her nanny Marilyn. Then suddenly, her attention was drawn to the shackles on Dietrich's hands, and he said that it was a seal. The girl was confused because she remembered that this thing was supposed to be used for prisoners who had powerful abilities. The Lord of Shadows says that the man said that he can participate in classes on an equal basis with others only with a seal, but the lady knows that this is a lie, and Alphonse planned this because he is much weaker. The little girl asked her brother if he was in pain because of her, to which he said that it was not very painful. Then the heroine asked where the key to these shackles was, and the boy, picking up his sword, said that the bastard took it with him and would free his hands tomorrow. Suddenly the young lady asked something that put Dietrich in a stupor for a moment. Why didn't he look into her eyes? Anissa asked the heir if he felt ashamed, but he asked a counter-question. Why would he feel that way? The princess replied that maybe because she then saw him beaten. The young master said that he didn't get it that bad back then. The girl started talking about how being weak is quite normal, and that guy is big and mature, and he's just a child. But the Lord of Shadows said that you can only be weak when you behave like a child. Anissa didn't say a word further, but simply gently stroked her uncomprehending protector on the head. Dietrich asked what she was doing, to which she told him to calm down and promised that she would quickly learn to use the sword to protect him. The baby claimed that he was still a child, so he needed protection. But the young master was not satisfied with this, and he wanted to tell her something, but could not. The young wizard quickly pulled his sister's hand away as she turned towards an unexpected sound. The maid with whom she had come here called out to her. Mevin, unable to hold back her tears, threw herself into the girl's arms. She says that she had already been searched everywhere and was very worried, for which she asked her forgiveness. However, the girl was reassured by the fact that Anissa was with Dietrich all this time. The maid reminded the young master that he also needed to be careful, because after all, children often get lost here at this time of year. The Lord of Shadows decided to leave, telling his subordinate that he was not as frivolous as she, for which she apologized and said that she was just worried. Looking at her brother, the main character cannot believe that he is a future villain. And where else can you meet a villain who is scolded by a maid? For a long time now, the heir Lagrange has been studying fencing, and once a week she goes to classes at the castle of Vaughn and returns with a seal. Looking at her tired brother, the protagonist called her demon Baal. He immediately responded with rattles in his hands, preparing to play with his mistress. But instead, the girl asked to free Dietrich from the seal, but the demon said that he was powerless here, since she contained divine power. Because of this, the girl pouted and called him a useless demon. The entity said that although he had no heart, her words hurt his feelings. Suddenly, Dietrich woke up, but his tired appearance left much to be desired. He asked his sister not to take it out on Baal. Anissa asked him how to free him, to which he replied that he needed a key. The girl said that if she meets that uncle, she will deal with him. The young magician smiled and said that if she meets him, she needs to hide, since he is one of Derek's favorite knights and Leatrice's younger brother. Anissa was very angry. She knew that someone was covering for this man, and he would get away with everything. And although Dietrich is despised, he is still one of the Duke's heirs. Looking at the boy's hands, she realizes that because of the seal, he will not be able to control the shadow, and therefore, he will not be able to cope with the killers who attack every night. The future villain sighed tiredly, which is why the little girl realized that he was completely exhausted and she needed to do something. She, thinking about Leatrice's younger brother Leon Euler, thought that if she remembered something from the original novel, she would definitely come up with something. The girl remembered that Marcus Euler, Leon's father, does not get along very well with Derek. She decides to use the latter, since Dietrich is very weak now. Baal, noticing how thoughtfully the princess was giggling, joked that she looked like a witch, but she also joked, asking what the useless demon said. The entity said that she was very rude, and the protagonist decided with complete determination that she needed at least a chance to destroy Leon. A few days later, Anissa, sitting on the couch and drawing, noticed Lancel, who brought her a tray of food. The subordinate was not satisfied with the fact that she was looking for her again, but he himself had taken care of the little mistress since her childhood. The man continued to mumble something displeased, and the young lady repeated her question, and the servant said that someone had called her nanny, and the little lady asked who. The main character was wary when she heard from the food delivery man that Leon Euler had taken Marilyn. Lancel added that this man is a knight, but he does not think that the little lady has heard anything about him. Suddenly, Anissa, stomping her foot menacingly, told her subordinate to take her to this uncle, but he indifferently asked if she wanted to see her beloved nanny. The girl, decisively hitting the chair with her fist, declared that this was her order. Carrying the baby in his arms, he says that she causes a lot of problems, and she has become even nastier since their last meeting, but the lady asked him to remain silent. Soon the couple came to the garden, where the protagonist heard her beloved nanny persistently asking someone to leave her alone. The knight asked the girl how long she would reject him, because since she was good enough for him, she did not need to work herself up. Lancel asked what they should do now that he had brought her here, but she asked him to be quiet. Leon, meanwhile, asked Mary if she was free. The uncle reminded his beloved that she was soon 30, and she was no longer so young for marriage, but the maid strictly asked him not to put her in a difficult position. The knight called her choice very stupid, then said that she did not belong in that shack called Lagrange Palace, so he invited her to come to them. Anissa listens to the man's words that the upstart Dietrich will never become a duke, because unlike their Alphonse, no one supports him. Leon furiously declared that the successor to the Lagranges would be the one chosen by the Euler family, and the time of the ruler of the North was up, because the women had driven him crazy. Marilyn asked him to be more careful with his expressions, to which he said that it was most likely true, because Derek was in love with Leatrice. The man adds that it was he who gave him this key. Leon says that this key is not only for the seal itself, it can open the basement where the sealing stone is located. The uncle explained what he was getting at. The fate of the entire family depended on the Eulers. The knight advises the girl to join them quickly, and if she agrees while she is still young, he promises that he will not have more than 2 mistresses. Lancel closed the mouth of the main character because she was about to start using obscene language because of what this fool was saying. The frivolous man began to leave the maid, asking her to think carefully about this. The impudent man also told the maid that he had no intention of kissing her, but the little lady suddenly noticed something that greatly surprised her. Lancel, coming out of his hide-and-seek, rushed to Mevin and asked how she was. But the protagonist, watching Leon leaving, thinks what happened to his aura. The girl realized that this aura meant that he was in anticipation of something. Anissa, embittered that this guy dared to touch Marilyn and Dietrich, realized that she had a chance to follow him and find out everything. Leon, having reached a large stone wall, around which there were only tall trees, cautiously turned around. When he was sure that no one was watching him, he pulled out several bricks from the wall to create a hole. Anissa watches as he told a friend on the other side of the fence that he was all clear, and then asked if he had brought the money, to which he reminded him of the sealing stone. Members of the Lagrange family are born with the ability to control demons, but if they fail to do so, then it can be done with the help of this stone. The heroine knows that for the Lagranges, the demon of shadows is the source of their strength and a symbol of their power, but she guesses that this cunning man is going to sell the stone. Sipping a valuable artifact through the hole, the knight asks the buyer if he is sure, to which he asked if he had time to doubt their deal. The recipient of the jewelry said that he would immediately go to the bank, and Leon, greedily looking at his money, laughed and said that he would take his word for it. Having received his benefit, the trader immediately went about his business as if nothing had happened, without even noticing that the girl was watching him all the time. Anissa, resolutely clenching her fist, was delighted that she managed to catch this scoundrel red-handed. The Lagrange family is one of the most cruel, heartless, and notorious, but on the short winter night they hold banquets to drive away the cold. Dietrich changed into a beautiful, warm outfit, in which he is soon going to attend a banquet. But then the little lady comes up to him and asks him to take her with him. He coldly asked why he would do this. The girl said that she wanted to try winter pudding, thinking that if she told the truth that she wanted to go there to accuse Leon, he would not take her. The boy said that nothing good would come from her presence there, and when she asked why, he replied that something might happen if Derek found out about her. The young man decided not to say anything more, and Anissa hinted that she even dressed smartly and cutely, but the young magician said that there was nothing beautiful about her. The little one immediately pouted, and in her thoughts called her brother such a bastard, because Marilyn, on the contrary, said that she looked like a fairy. Still, casting his cold glance at his sister, he allowed her to go with him to the celebration. The lady was so happy that she jumped. She expected him to give in if she just put pressure on him, but Dietrich reminded her to behave decently. Finding herself at a banquet attended by rich ladies and gentlemen, the little lady was surprised that the castle was even larger than she had expected. While all the elite guests were seated at the table, the head duke of the Lagrange family greeted Anissa, saying that they had not seen each other for a long time. The girl also modestly greeted him, and Dietrich, sitting down on a chair, told the gentleman that this was his sister. Derek asked him if she was Camille's daughter. The man told the girl that she didn't seem to be afraid of him at all, and the little girl laughed, but in her mind, she assumed that he had probably already forgotten about her. But then her attention was attracted by a certain guest who was sitting nearby. He told the young lady that they seemed to have met somewhere before. It turned out to be a grandfather with a long beard. He was surprised out loud that there was an heiress in the palace, although the Lagranges rarely had girls. Then the grandfather was struck by the fact that now he did not have a headache in such a place as usual, which the woman next to him agreed with. The heroine realized that she had managed to clear this place. She is glad that she managed to clear the place of such a suffocating aura, which was so cloudy that it seemed that the guests were enveloped in a thick fog. But the girl still remembered why she decided to attend this banquet, in order to deal with Leon, who was sitting directly opposite her. The young lady is angry that this scoundrel is once again devouring Mevin with his eyes, although he himself looks like he is twice her age. The child clenched his fist in anger, wondering why this bastard wouldn't leave Mevin alone, even though she had already refused him. The protagonist decided it was time to act. Anissa realizes that Derek loves it when people shake in fear in front of him, and if she pretends that Leon scares her more, she will interest him. Suddenly, in the middle of a quiet feast, the young Madame Lagrange sharply pushes her chair back, causing everyone present to turn their heads towards her. The actress without an Oscar, looking at the knight in fear, began to shake all over. Mr. Derek calmly asked the little girl what happened. She was glad in her thoughts that, as she had expected, she had attracted his attention. The gentleman realized that the girl was looking fearfully at Leon, so he asked why she was staring at him like that. The knight also began to sweat from his face when the ruler of the clan spoke coldly about him. Menacingly placing a glass of wine on the table, Derek asked the unfortunate woman why she was afraid of this uncle if she were both family members. But Anissa said in a trembling voice that this guy once said that he was much scarier than the head duke. It is noticeable that the man was hurt by the child's words that someone else could be worse than him. The little girl asked the maid if this was true, because Leon had recently threatened her in the garden, but the girl embarrassedly asked how she knew this. Mevin still said that it was true, and added that this man said that the fate of the whole family depended only on the Oilers. Leon jumped up indignantly and told His Highness that everything was wrong. But the traitor's heart finally sank when the young lady admitted that she saw him exchange a red stone for money with someone. The head of the clan asked the knight not to tell him that it was their precious sealing stone, but he excitedly declared that Anissa was lying. An important woman who was sitting between Derek and Leon ordered the latter to leave immediately, but he asked her in bewilderment. This lady turned out to be Leatrice. She reminded the traitor that he was at a multi-hour night banquet, and there was no need to make a scene. She told His Highness that if her brother was really guilty, then she asked to deal with him properly immediately after the celebration, to which he agreed. Soon, the winter celebration in the castle continued, and the ruler of the family asked the culprit to give him the key and leave. After the banquet, the young magician and the main character arrived home and were already getting ready for bed. But the girl was outraged that her brother said that she was sleeping alone today. The baby called out to him, but he did not respond. And then she asked if he was angry with her. The boy said that she promised to behave decently, but she said that Leon was bad and offended him and Marilyn, so she answered him. The young master said that he did not need help, then asked why she was so worried about that maid, to which the girl replied that she was good. The Lord of Shadows irritably stated that there are no good people in this castle, and there is no need to sympathize with anyone because it will lead nowhere. The sister, following her brother, objected that there was nothing wrong in sympathy, but he said that it was shameful, to which the little lady again denied. The young master sat quietly by the fireplace, and Anissa told him that if he needed help, then he should just accept it, because, after all, he was a child. After this, the baby added that her maid was definitely a good person, but the boy asked why she was so sure of this. She, knowing that she shouldn't be told that she could read auras, laughed modestly and said that she just knew it. Heading to the bed, Dietrich told his sister that such a naive girl as she was easy to deceive, but when she asked when she was deceived, he asked her to forget about what he said. When the young man asked her to go with him, the girl happily asked if they still slept together, to which he replied that yes. The heroine happily went to bed with her protector, hugging him. She is happy that at least today she will not fall asleep shivering from the cold. Since winter has not yet passed, and the palace in which they live is not heated, the children have to look for different ways to keep warm. But when Anissa sleeps with her protector, she doesn't feel so cold at night, and she also feels much calmer next to him. The main character, while the maid was straightening her hair, promised her that she would become her protector and would protect her from all villains. However, the girl herself thinks that she would rather die as a wanderer than as a protector of Mevin, and this is only possible if she hone her sword skills with Ball. But the girl replied that lovely ladies should never protect others, but on the contrary, she should protect her. The baby objected that she was so weak, but suddenly a certain man approached the ladies and told the princess that she was really not like the other Lagrange children. The baby turned her head in surprise in the direction of the sound, amazed that a stranger had suddenly appeared in the garden of dead roses. Looking around, she saw the same grandfather whom she had already seen at the table at the banquet. She called out to Mr. Joseph, puzzled. The young heiress bowed to the unexpected guest and said hello, and when her grandfather asked if she knew who he was, she replied that he did not. He said his name was Joseph Louis Euclid, but she could just call him Joseph. The little girl was surprised that Euclid was among the Lagranges. The girl asked if he was really Euclid, to which the grandfather said that yes, but he became a traitor, but his younger brother was the head of the house of this family. But Joseph admitted that he killed this brat and joined the Lagranges. Anissa wondered if that meant he was bad, and her great-grandfather. The old man said that he saw red eyes on the protagonist. He asked the child if she had them since birth. The maid answered that yes, and that they shone like two large rubies. He said that he apparently could not see them at the banquet due to the lighting. Grandfather says that he was wondering if she was the guardian of the North from the legends. The heroine, having heard about the keeper, realized that she had already heard this somewhere. Joseph says that the Lagranges worship demons and the Euclids worship the sun god, but there are also supporters of Eris, the prophets. A young lady with burning eyes listens to a legend from him, which says that a child with azure eyes will be the savior of the North. The protagonist understood who she was talking about. Saint Charlotte is the heroine who will save Dietrich, but the little girl does not understand why her grandfather is looking for her among the Lagranges. The exile started talking about how Camilla had failed, and there were rumors that the child had died, which meant it was impossible. The heiress doesn't understand why he started talking about Camilla, but apparently he knows the truth. The girl told her grandfather that he was saying some strange things, but he laughed and apologized to her for being annoying. Handing the candy to the little one, he asked her if she liked all sorts of stories, then added that he felt that his mind was becoming clearer next to her. The child took the candy from him, and the grandfather also admitted that he felt as calm as in the temple of Eris. The protagonist smiled sweetly at him and thanked him for the treat, but in her thoughts, she realized that she needed to be much more careful with her ability. He also smiled and expressed his hope that they would see each other often, and the girl thought that if someone found out her secret, she would be discovered. After a while, knocking on Joseph's house, the main character thinks that she should still be careful, but she shouldn't miss the opportunity to find out more. She was opened by a smiling old man who asked if she had come to him to listen to stories about Eris again, to which she replied that she had. As he walked his listener into the house, he said that she seemed to enjoy hearing stories about her, to which she said that Eris was cool, although she was not. The exile says that, as he mentioned earlier, this girl could influence people's feelings, and although she could not make someone fall in love with her, she could force someone to give preference to her. The grandfather added that this person was as interesting to him as she was, but Anissa asked why he was here then, since he said that the North does not worship Eris. He replied that he was simply studying demons. He admits that he is trying to recreate the demon using the powers of the sacred tree. The girl was interested in his words, and Joseph said that even though Eris was weaker than the sun god, even as a human, she fought with demons. Going down the stairs somewhere, he asked the little girl if she wanted to look at the sacred tree, which does not grow here because the lands are filled with shadows. She followed him, wondering in her mind how this storyteller quickly changed the topic, but she was really interested. Handing the plant to the child, the old man said that this is a sacred tree that fights with curses. The girl thought that it was apparently useful. The young lady looked at the sprout in admiration, thinking that it would be nice to take it for herself. Then Joseph just started talking about how she could take this tree for herself, and he had 2 more of them in his scent. She thanked him for such generosity. While the princess was looking at her gift, her grandfather said that the tree would not grow, but she would feel better if it was next to her. But then the storyteller said something that surprised the main character. The sacred plant would not be friends with her brother. He explained that Dietrich's demon is Baal, the only one of the demons who is not affected by Eris's power, so they are not compatible. The protagonist understood why this boy's aura was impossible to read. Walking home in the evening, Anissa reflects on the fact that she thought her brother was insensitive, but after being with him longer, she was able to see his better side. The lady admits that he has very nice features, and she does not think that he will become a villain when he grows up. But then the poor girl, not suspecting anything, heard someone wheezing, after which she saw a terrifying picture. She saw in the middle of the clearing many human bodies that were smeared with blood, and under which there was also blood. Dietrich stood quietly among them. Hearing a strange sound behind him, the boy turned around. His gaze depicted nothing more than callousness, cold-bloodedness, and cruelty. But the very next moment, his entire terrifying image seemed to be blown away by the wind. He became the same as before again when he was surprised to see his sister. Looking at the Lord of Shadows in shock, the little girl fell to the ground, unable to utter 2 words. Walking towards the girl through the corpses and their blood, the young master asked her what she was doing here at such a time. She wanted to answer something, but could not, because she was overcome by the fear that the heir, in a fit of anger, would do something terrible to her. But fortunately, nothing like that happened, and Dietrich only took her into his arms and asked if she went to see that old man again. Going to the palace, the young man said that the garden was dangerous at night, but she said that the sun had not yet set. The young magician suggested to the girl that next time he take her to her grandfather, to which she agreed. The heroine thought that there is nothing wrong with being a villain in a world where everyone wants to kill you. The main thing for her is that he is kind to her. Thus, 5 years of her life with her brother in the palace have already flown by. The protagonist, hearing that someone entered the room, turned around to look. But there, a terrible sight awaited her. Dietrich, sighing heavily and holding one hand, showed up in the room completely covered in blood, with which he even smeared the door. When the little girl asked him in fear what had happened, he, as if nothing had happened, walked around the room and asked her to leave behind. The young lady is overcome by fear and hopelessness. She does not know what to do, although her friend was very seriously wounded. Looking at the wounded heir, tears came to her eyes at the mere thought that he might die. The girl began to think about what to do. Suddenly, the heroine runs out of the room, shouting that she will go and find Marilyn. The little girl knows that she has many friends in Vaughan Castle, and she will definitely help. She ran as fast as she could, wondering if she should call Joseph and who the hell had hit her brother so hard. But suddenly, a sudden realization shocked her. Dietrich had a cut on his left eye, which means that Derek is already going to kill him. But then the girl stopped running because she unexpectedly ran into something that scared her very much. She was led astray by the head of the Lagrange family himself. He leaned intimidatingly towards the child and asked where his son was now. The protagonist fell to the floor out of fear. She can't understand what Derek forgot here. Just looking at the man's frightening red aura, the young lady was amazed at the idea that he was going to kill her protector. Without waiting for an answer from the child, the gentleman hammered a bolt on the girl and walked further to look into the room of the Lord of Shadows. Thanks to the original book, Anissa remembers that this is the very moment when he became obsessed with Leatrice and began helping Alphonse. In the novel, Dietrich survived, but he is now in too bad a condition, and the young lady is worried that this might affect the plot. As she watches Derek leave, she wonders if everything will be okay and if her brother will survive if she leaves things as they are. But the next moment, she decisively and sharply rose to her feet, deciding that now she must by any means get there before the formidable ruler of the clan. As soon as Anissa shouted out the name of Baal, he immediately appeared nearby, preparing to listen to an order from his princess. The child ordered the demon to send her to her brother, and quickly, and he, ready to just snap his finger, said that her wish would be fulfilled. The very next second, the young lady jumped out of the portal straight onto the sofa, on which the exhausted Lord of the Shadows was sitting. Without wasting time, the space traveler told Dietrich that she urgently needed to escape, but he calmly asked why. She loudly repeated that he needed to save himself because the Duke was already coming here. The boy frowned with displeasure when his sister started talking about his father. The young master immediately called his demon, and he was nearby at that very second. The heir asked the entity if he could handle it. He answered the ruler that in his current state, this was hardly possible. The girl, touchingly kicking the demon, hysterically ordered him to start protecting her brother, but only looked at her in bewilderment. Baal asked if they could use the princess as an intermediary, but Dietrich said no. Then the demon said that they seemed to have no way out. Then the young master ordered him to bring any other candidate here, arguing that his father would not kill him in the presence of others. The evil spirits immediately carried out the owner's order, after which the unsuspecting Uruk, who had previously been calmly eating a croissant, fell from the portal in the room. The blonde screamed in bewilderment and asked what the hell was going on. The girl waved and said hello to him, but Baal took her away, as the Duke was already on his way. The demon and his princess disappeared. Dietrich stood up from the sofa and bowed to the one standing in front of him, and the sudden guest froze in amazement. Mr. Derek appeared in the room, surrounded by a terrifying blood-red aura. The man menacingly asked Uruk what he was doing here, and the main character, secretly watching what was happening, was surprised that even with the presence of another child, his thirst for blood did not decrease. Without waiting for an answer from the frightened boy, the head of the clan said that he didn't care, because he was a complete disappointment, for which he quietly apologized. He then turned his attention to Dietrich and was horrified to see his appearance. The gentleman asked his son if he was injured, to which he said yes. Derek reminded the boy that he was one of the best candidates, and he should take care of himself, which made Anissa very angry, because she knows that he was the one who beat him. But then something happens that the girl is so afraid of. Her father says that he needs to talk to Derek now, so he orders Yurik to leave the room. Afraid of losing hope that everything would be fine with her brother, the protagonist suddenly stuck her hand out of the balcony where she had been hiding all this time. The little girl decided to take advantage of her plan, and running out of the balcony, loudly asked the blonde not to leave, but also to play with her. He became very embarrassed and asked her what happened to her, but she, continuing to portray a capricious child, repeated that she wanted to play with him. The girl screams, where she asks her friend not to leave, and the boy's pleas to let him go caused Derek to have an ambiguous reaction, which looked scary. Suddenly, he grabbed Anissa by the clothes and brought her closer to him, saying that this child does not look a bit like Camilla. The man added that her beautiful face could be profitably sold into slavery to compensate for the harm from her mother. He called it a shame that Camilla did not give him as many children as he wanted. Then the head of the family suggested that if he sold the heroine now, while she was still young, he would receive even more. The girl thought what a bastard he was. But then Dietrich objected that this little thing has abilities, but she is still too small to use them properly. The father smiled and said that in this case he could get even more money for it, because rads with abilities are quite expensive. He cited Dietrich's mother as an example of such a slave, but Dietrich did not react to the Duke's boorish behavior, did not even raise an eyebrow. But suddenly, a barely noticeable, thin smile appeared on the boy's face, which interested Derek and probably confused him. The young man calmly asked his father if he wanted to disgrace the Lagrange family. He, not expecting such a question from him, asked again. The boy explains that his sister may not be a candidate, but she is still part of the family, and she is not useless, so selling her would tarnish the family's reputation. The Duke, after thinking a little, nevertheless let go of Anissa so that she fell painfully to the floor, saying that you couldn't argue with that. He ordered the child with the ability to tell him her name, and she, trembling all over with fear, introduced herself. Smiling eerily, the man said that it seemed like it was time for her to sleep. He didn't say anything else, but simply left the room, finally leaving the children alone. The main character immediately rushed into her brother's arms, which surprised him slightly. It was still unexpected for the boy, but he hugged his sister and stroked her head and said that everything was fine now. The Lord of Shadows suddenly wondered if he was really used to taking care of this lady, and such things had already become familiar to him. The young man was so lost in thought that he did not even notice that his sister had already called him several times. Finally, he asked what she wanted. His hand shook when he saw tears in Anissa's eyes, as she asked him if he was okay. The young man felt so strange from what he saw that he didn't even know what to think. It was at that moment that Dietrich felt something, and it was like a premonition, but not good, but bad. A child who was in no way connected with him and was not special to him, and who was supposed to become his victim, suddenly became important to him. Sometime later, Yurik, walking in the garden, suddenly heard someone calling out to him, and also calling his name incorrectly, Yuri. It turned out to be the main character, who, looking out of a hole in the wall, waved at him smilingly. The boy embarrassedly said that she could not be in his garden all the time, so he asked her to wait. He immediately deftly jumped over the fence, although the girl thought that this wall was still quite high. The protagonist noticed that this young man is confident in himself, but he is still a candidate for heir. Once nearby, the blonde said that his name was not Yuri but Yurik, but she again called him incorrectly. Then he sighed and asked why she had come. The baby asked where he was going, but he asked why she was asking about this. Anissa said that he was a candidate and could not see Bal, so she asked if he had quarreled with Dietrich. He replied that he did not know. The blonde added that they have different priorities, and this guy also sets his own rules. The princess displeasedly asked him why he was so weak. The boy did not deny the words of the main character, which made him a little upset. The little one suddenly started talking about how he had very beautiful eyes, but the young heir, turning red as a tomato, said that this was not so. The young lady continued to say that they were very beautiful, but suddenly she felt someone's presence nearby. Dietrich appeared next to her, covered in some kind of dust. The girl asked him where he was, but he moved his sister away from the blonde and said that he had already asked her not to play with this guy. Yurik indignantly asked the Lord of Shadows if he grabbed him by the ankle and forced him to summon him. But the young magician, without uttering a word, began to shake off the dust to spite the boy. This made him very angry, and he asked if he had called someone in front of his father. Unexpectedly, Dietrich said that maybe yes. This strange answer puzzled the blonde, and he asked him again. The future villain spoke with a smile about what would happen if he said yes. He reminded his friend that if he wanted to scream, no one would hear him. Anissa, thinking that she was going to cry because her brother looked like a villain at such moments, asked him where he was. Looking at the air, the girl thought that despite the fact that he is a villain, his aura is vaguely gray in color, and she cannot understand what he is thinking about. The young man replied that he heard that she was looking for him, to which she looked at him in bewilderment. The young master, pulling the girl's hand away from him, asked not to look for him anymore because she was not yet old enough to do this alone. The Lord of Shadows left, and Anissa and Yurik were left looking after him in bewilderment. The latter suddenly noticed that the young lady was in tears and seemed to be holding herself back, so he asked her if everything was okay. Loudly indignant, the heroine asked if it means that she is not old enough if she is already 5 years old, but the blonde sheepishly replied that, in fact, it is, but the little girl called him evil and ungrateful. Several days have passed since that incident, but Dietrich has not appeared in the palace for a long time. Anissa asked Bal about him, but he insisted that he did not know. The demon repeated to the princess that he really didn't know, but she said that he was lying, because he was her brother's henchman. The entity said that he is not a henchman. Walking outside, the lady thought that the protector would be angry if he knew about this, and the development might be slow since she did not have enough knowledge. The baby, crawling through a hole in the wall, saw someone's man's legs, and already thought that it was Yurik, which is why she joyfully called him. But she was mistaken, and it turned out to be a completely unfamiliar guy who roughly grabbed her by the arm and lifted her so that the unfortunate woman screamed in pain. The bully asked the girl why she was screaming so much, then said that it was strange, because she was, in fact, just a child. Throwing the young lady to the ground, the guy was surprised to recognize Dietrich's younger sister in the unexpected guest. Only when the offender grabbed her cheeks did Anissa see his face and realize that it was Alphonse. The heir told her that she was beautiful, but untalented. The impudent man started talking about how friendship with her is insignificant, because in friendship one is always the slave of the other, but the girl asked him to let her go, because she came here to meet with Yurik and not with him. Not intending to let the poor girl go, Alphonse asked her why she wanted to meet with his competitor. The young lady fell silent, and then the guy, pushing her hard to the side, ordered her to answer. Even then, the main character did not speak, which angered the heir of Euclid even more. He asked if she was going to answer him at all.